Chapter 384. A Deal. Seeing Dishi's serious expression, Tian couldn't help but show his interest. Dishi seemed to recall many things. He didn't speak, but a booming voice was transmitted into Tian's mind. My name is Dishi, the war god of the Golden Dragon Clan. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the Dragon Clan suffered a world-ending catastrophe. An extremely powerful enemy appeared and wanted to exterminate the entire Dragon Clan. In order to survive, all the Dragon Clan united under the call of the Golden Dragon Emperor to fight against the powerful enemy. Unfortunately, the enemy we faced was too powerful. Even though all the Dragon Clan united, we still couldn't defeat it. In the end, all the Dragon Clan was forced to hide in the sea-leaving dragon abyss. But our enemies still pursued us, intending to destroy the sea-leaving dragon abyss and cut off the last chance of survival for the Dragon Clan. During the crisis, I followed the Dragon Emperor's order to find something that could save the Dragon Clan from extinction. Who knew that I would be ambushed by the enemy halfway? Although I was brave, the enemy was too powerful. In the end, after I killed the enemy, the dragon chi in my body was exhausted, and I died here. I didn't expect that after hundreds of thousands of years, I could see the light of day again. Unfortunately, I couldn't complete the task given to me by the Dragon Emperor. I let down the Dragon Emperor, and I let down the people of the Dragon Clan. I, Dishi, am the sinner of the Dragon Clan. Dishi said everything, and in the end, he was very emotional. Although he didn't make a sound, 2 golden lights overflowed from his huge dragon eyes, like rolling hot tears, and the dragon chi in the air spread with indescribable sorrow. Hearing Dishi's passionate words, Tian was moved. He knew that the ancient Dragon Clan was an existence that surpassed the 9th-grade spirit beast. Among the humans, only the Peak of the Sky Emperor Realm Warriors, or even the legendary God Realm Warriors, could fight against the Dragon Clan. What kind of powerful enemy did the Dragon Clan encounter that actually destroyed all the Dragon Clan? Although Dishi's words were simple and didn't explain the situation in detail, in Tian's heart, an extremely tragic picture of the Dragon Clan's destruction was outlined. No matter who the powerful enemy was, it was definitely not something that the current Tian could imagine. Although the current Dishi had been dead for hundreds of thousands of years, after the awakening of the dragon soul, his strength was still extraordinary. He was definitely comparable to a Heaven Evolution Realm martial artist, or even a Heaven Realm martial artist. Tian reckoned that even the current Tang Hao might not have reached the heavenly evolution state, or perhaps he had barely reached it. If a dragon soul that had just awakened after hundreds of thousands of years had the strength of a heavenly evolution state, then how terrifying would a golden dragon be when it was at its peak? It was definitely comparable to a human celestial state martial artist. An ordinary golden giant dragon could grow to about 1,000 meters in length when it reached adulthood. Dishi claimed to be the war god of the golden dragons, so it was normal for him to be much larger than the average golden dragon. The dragon race was so terrifying, yet they were exterminated by someone. Tian simply could not imagine how terrifying that person was. He was definitely an existence that could overturn the heavens and overturn the seas with a flip of his hand. Lord Dishi, you failed to complete His Majesty the Dragon Emperor's task, so you want me to help you find the thing that can save the dragon race, right? Dishi was in sorrow, and his expression was gloomy, but Tian had already understood what he meant, so he said, "Yes." Dishi's voice came again. Still, only Tian could hear it. He said, "I have already fallen, and I am still in a remnant soul state. I cannot leave the land of the fallen. Even if I have the blade dragon arm, it is too weak. The dragon chi that it can produce is not enough for me to survive." Tian nodded slightly, but he was silent in his heart. During the time that Dishi had gone crazy, who knew how much dragon chi had been wasted for no reason? The blade dragon arm had only opened the second azure dragon seal, and the accumulated dragon chi for several years had only allowed the dragon sky to condense a heaven-defying dragon soul. Compared to the real golden giant dragon soul, it was like the difference between a loach and a dragon, or a sparrow and a phoenix. The dragon soul could not leave the land of the fallen too far, or its soul would dissipate. If Dishi left at this time, he would definitely disappear in half a month at most. Even with the blade dragon arm, it was impossible for him to survive a month. Human. At this time, Dishi retracted his gaze from the sky and looked at Nye Tian again. His face was solemn, and his voice sounded, "Are you willing to complete the task that His Majesty the Dragon Emperor entrusted to me?" Receiving Dishi's gaze, Nye Tian's heart trembled inexplicably, but he immediately calmed down and asked, "Lord Dishi, the dragon clan has already been destroyed. Even if we find the thing that can save the dragon clan from extinction, is it still useful?" "It's useful, of course it's useful." Dishi's expression changed, and he said excitedly, "When I left, His Majesty the Dragon Emperor once told me that not only can that thing save the dragon clan from extinction, but it can still play a role after the dragon clan is destroyed." Nye Tian was slightly stunned, and he was puzzled. Could it be that that thing could resurrect the dead divine dragon? He composed himself and said, "May I ask Lord Dishi, what exactly are you looking for?" Dishi kept saying that thing, so Nye Tian still did not know what he was looking for. However, judging from Dishi's expression, that thing might be a taboo of the dragon clan, or something that the dragon clan revered and looked up to, and could not mention casually. Dishi's expression immediately became complicated, and his eyes that were like the sun and moon stared at Nye Tian again. After a long time, he finally confirmed something and said, "What His Majesty the Dragon Emperor wants me to find is the dragon's spring vein." Dragon spring vein? Nye Tian was slightly stunned. He had never heard of this thing, but seeing Dishi's solemn and sacred face, he guessed that it must be something important to the dragon clan. Dishi calmed down and continued, "The dragon spring is the birthplace of my dragon clan. When the dragon clan reached its peak, the dragon spring was respected as the heaven and earth holy spring. But later on, the dragon clan began an endless civil war. The great golden dragon clan and the ruthless demonic armored black dragon clan, in order to fight for the title of Dragon King, launched a war that lasted for tens of thousands of years. In the end, the golden dragon clan won, but they also paid a terrible price. And the most terrifying thing was yet to come. The dragon spring vein that gave birth to the dragon spring was actually stolen by someone. The dragon spring vein was lost, and the dragon spring began to dry up. The greatest dragon clan began to decline. Until 10,000 years later, the dragon spring completely disappeared, and the dragon clan walked on the brink of destruction. Later on, powerful enemies invaded, and the dragon clan was finally wiped out. Dishi's expression was gloomy, and there was a hint of sorrow in his words. He was indeed a golden dragon with complicated emotions. Chapter 385. Dishi and Nye Tian both had different emotions. One was remorseful, and the other was sighing. After a while, both of them calmed down a lot. Nye Tian looked at Dishi with a strange expression on his face. He was a more pragmatic person. He wouldn't help Dishi for free just because he told a good story. Moreover, even Dishi couldn't find the dragon spring vein. How could it be easy to find? He smiled and said, "Lord Dishi, is it really appropriate for you to entrust such an important task to me?" Dishi didn't immediately answer Nye Tian. Instead, he stared at the latter with a calm expression. Nye Tian was scared by the two huge dragon eyes. He frowned and said, "Besides, even if I promise you now, I might not really do it." "No." Dishi's voice sounded. This time, he blurted out, "As long as you promise me, you will definitely do it." Nye Tian was slightly stunned. He thought to himself, "This guy is quite confident in me." Dishi continued, "Your eyes are different from ordinary humans." "What's different?" Nie Tian was stunned. This guy just stared at him for a long time. Was he looking at his eyes? She said, ordinary humans are in awe and fear when they see our great dragon race. But in your eyes there is no fear. There is only extreme determination and confidence. Therefore, you are destined to become a great human, and a great human will never break his promise. Seeing Shi's solemn face, Nie Tian was speechless for a moment. He couldn't help but feel proud in his heart. This old dragon has a good eye. What he said sounds reasonable. Everyone liked compliments. Even Nie Tian wasn't surprised. Especially when this compliment came from an ancient divine dragon. It would be strange if he wasn't proud. However, Shi was right. Nie Tian was indeed a man of his word. He had a principle. He would never make a promise easily. But once he made a promise, he must keep it. If he couldn't keep it, he must keep it. After thinking calmly for a moment, Nie Tian said directly, Lord Shi, I won't help you for nothing. If you want me to promise you, you must give me good benefits. Since Shi wanted something from him, Nie Tian didn't care too much. He just wanted the blade dragon arm. This wasn't too much. Well, very good. Nie Tian's condition didn't make Shi angry. Instead, he nodded slightly in approval. If a person didn't want any benefits and directly agreed to save your people, that would be a real problem. Since Nie Tian had made such a request, it meant that he really saw this as a fair trade and not a scam. Shi's dragon whiskers fluttered, and the blade dragon arm appeared in front of Nie Tian. It was completely intact, and even more powerful than when it had been on Long Haotian's body. Shi said, I have already repaired the damage to the blade dragon arm. Moreover, I have injected my dragon qi into it, making it even more powerful. Nie Tian nodded heavily, and his eyes shone with a green light. The saber dragon arm was one of the legendary 4 great profound arms. At this moment, it was right in front of him. How could Nie Tian not be excited? Duanmu Bai, who was at the side, was completely stunned. He thought to himself in bewilderment, what is Nie Tian saying to this old dragon? It seems like they are making a deal. My power was obviously stronger than Nie Tian's, but this old dragon chose to trade with him instead of me. His eyesight isn't that great. Duanmu glanced at Nie Tian and felt a sense of defeat. Shi chose to make a deal with Nie Tian instead of Duanmu Bai. This undoubtedly showed that, in Shi's eyes, Nie Tian was more powerful than Duanmu Bai. Nie Tian City Lord is my son's teacher. It's normal for him to be more powerful than me. Duanmu Bai glanced at Nie Tian again and thought so. Only then did he feel much better. Nie Tian didn't pay attention to Duanmu Bai at all. His eyes were on the saber dragon arm. Shi saw Nie Tian's great desire for the saber dragon arm. He directly threw the saber dragon arm to Nie Tian and said, as long as you promise to help me complete the mission of His Majesty Dragon Emperor and find the lost dragon spring vein, the saber dragon arm is yours. The moment Nie Tian took the saber dragon arm, he immediately felt endless power. The terrifying aura hidden in it made him shocked. Even Little Nine and Corpse Demon Monarch in his body were stunned at this moment. The saber dragon arm was one of the legendary 4 great profound arms. It had the terrifying power to split the heavens and earth. Taking a deep breath, Nie Tian calmed himself down. He looked at Shi and the corners of his mouth curled up. This expression was clearly saying that a saber dragon arm was not enough for him to agree to Shi's request. Searching for the lost dragon spring vein might seem simple, but the difficulty involved was unimaginably high. The dragon spring vein had been lost for hundreds of thousands of years. Who knew where it was now? Moreover, since the dragon spring vein was a divine object that could give birth to dragon springs, its value was naturally immeasurable. As long as there was a dragon spring vein, the legendary dragon spring could be restored. And the dragon spring was the birthplace of the dragon clan. This was undoubtedly a super major event that saved the entire dragon clan. Therefore, it was absolutely impossible to satisfy Nye Tian's appetite with just a saber dragon arm. She noticed the strange look in Nye Tian's eyes, as if he had seen through something. His booming voice sounded again, "Human, you are indeed a trustworthy person. If you have any other conditions, feel free to state them. Even if you want to fuse with me, I will definitely cooperate with you." Fusing with the ancient dragon soul. Nye Tian had really thought about this before, but at that time, he had made a wrong judgment about the strength of the ancient dragon soul. Now that he knew Di Shi's true strength, he had long dispelled this idea. Even little Nine, who had been clamoring to eat the dragon soul, did not make any noise. However, if Di Shi was really willing to cooperate, then it was really possible for Nye Tian to fuse with the dragon soul. Once he fused with the dragon soul, Nye Tian's strength would definitely improve qualitatively. If he went into seclusion for a few more months and refined the power of the dragon soul, he would probably be able to rise to the true element realm, or even the high level of the true element realm. It had to be said that such a proposal was very tempting to Nye Tian. After thinking about it carefully and seriously, Nye Tian finally gave up on the idea of fusing with the dragon soul. On one hand, his current strength was too weak. Even if Di Shi really cooperated, fusing with the dragon soul would be a very dangerous thing, so he was not willing to risk his life. On the other hand, Di Shi was more important to Nye Tian. After a pause, Nye Tian smiled and said, "Lord Di Shi, if you want me to agree, I have another condition." "Speak." Di Shi's voice suddenly became excited. Chapter 386. Let the Golden Dragon Soul be a guard for Heaven Luo City. This was Nye Tian's second condition. The current Nye Tian had offended too many people. Nanshan Region's top force, God Transformation Sect, Sumi Lingdu's various aristocratic families, the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild, the #1 assassin organization in the 3,000 Small Worlds, Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion, and the mysterious Heaven Burial Association. Any one of these forces was enough to completely destroy Heaven Luo City in the blink of an eye. Therefore, if there was no Di Shi, Nye Tian planned to let Gu Yi think of a way to put Heaven Luo City under Dan Wu City, become a private city of the Alchemist Guild, and borrow the power of the Alchemist Guild to protect Heaven Luo City. Anyway, he still had several 9th-tier pill recipes in his hands. Even the president of the Alchemist Guild, Meng Fanchen, would probably be tempted by the 9th-tier pill recipes. But now that there was a behemoth like Di Shi, Nye Tian's thoughts became active. If he could have an ancient golden dragon soul to guard Heaven Luo City, then not to mention these forces, even if the forces of the upper world came down, they might not be able to touch Heaven Luo City at all. Anyway, Di Shi was currently in the form of a dragon soul, and couldn't leave Heaven Luo Mountain. It was perfect to be a guard for Heaven Luo City. As long as there was Di Shi guarding, Heaven Luo City would definitely be the unmoving city of the 3,000 Small Worlds. Perhaps even the core city of the 3,000 Small Worlds, Sumi Lingdu, was not as safe as Heaven Luo City. Guard Heaven Luo City? Di Shi's voice was surprised, and then his huge dragon head swayed, looking at the small city behind him. In Di Shi's eyes, the Heaven Luo City under his feet was only the size of a palm. As long as he casually stepped on it, the entire Heaven Luo City would become a city of ruins. Heaven Luo City is my city. But recently there have been some troubles, and I provoked some rather troublesome enemies, so? Nye Tian was a little embarrassed, and wanted to explain. Good. I promise you. Without waiting for Nye Tian to finish his explanation, Di Shi said in an extremely solemn tone, I, Di Shi, swear on the holiest dragon spring that as long as I, Di Shi, am here, Tian Luo City will never be destroyed. Nye Tian was stunned. He thought to himself, this old dragon is really awesome. He actually swore on the dragon spring vein. Very good. The dragon spring vein was a sacred item of the dragon race. Di Shi's oath was naturally very safe. All right. At this moment, Nye Tian no longer hesitated. He nodded heavily and said, I, Nye Tian, swear by the honor of the war god that I will definitely find the lost dragon spring vein for Di Shi. Since Di Shi was so impressive, Nye Tian naturally had to express his gratitude. The honor of the god of war? Di Shi was slightly stunned, and the way he looked at Nye Tian was a little strange. Nye Tian didn't explain anything, he directly said, Lord Di Shi, don't worry, I, Nye Tian, will definitely fulfill the promise I made, unless my body and soul are destroyed. Good. Di Shi was slightly moved. He said in a clear voice, let's clap hands as an oath. With that, Di Shi raised a huge dragon claw that was comparable to a mountain. Nye Tian looked at the dragon claw that was hundreds of meters in radius in front of him, his face darkened. Immediately after, he slapped his palm out, and a huge palm print appeared in the air, hitting the dragon claw, making a deafening sound. Duan Mu Bai saw that the human and the dragon clapped hands for no reason, his face dripping with sweat. Di Shi was slightly excited, he suddenly said, Human, your name is Nye Tian, very good. I am willing to become brothers with you, are you willing? Nye Tian was speechless. He thought to himself, I've only heard of people becoming sworn brothers of the opposite sex, but I've never heard of anyone becoming sworn brothers with a golden dragon. Is this really a good thing? Human, are you looking down on me? I am the god of war of the greatest golden dragon clan. Di Shi saw Nye Tian's reaction, he was instantly enraged. Nye Tian hurriedly said, Big brother Di Shi, you misunderstood, how can I look down on the great golden dragon? Good! Before Nye Tian finished speaking, Di Shi laughed loudly. His roar shook the 9 heavens. He roared, From today onwards, you and I are brothers. With that, Di Shi waved his huge dragon claw over. It seemed that he was going to hug Nye Tian, but seeing Nye Tian's figure, the huge dragon claw stopped in midair and retracted. All right. Nye Tian nodded slightly. He thought to himself, it's not bad to have a golden dragon as a brother. At this time, Di Shi suddenly asked, Nye Tian, how old are you? Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, then immediately said, over 200 years old. When Nye Tian died in his previous life, he was over 100 years old. After being reborn for 100 years, he was over 200 years old in total. Di Shi's dragon beard stiffened for a moment, then immediately said, You're actually so young. Young? Nye Tian was completely speechless. He shouted in his heart, You call this young? Do I look like an old monster that's 500 to 600 years old? Di Shi immediately understood and said, In our dragon clan, 200 years old is just a young dragon that has learned to speak. I didn't expect that in a human, he would be about to become an adult. From this, it can be inferred that the lifespan of a human is only 1,000 years. Nye Tian looked at Di Shi's serious expression and was speechless. It was obvious that this guy was not familiar with humans at all. How could ordinary humans live to more than 200 years old? Those who could live to 100 years old were already old and clumsy. How old is Big Brother Di Shi? Nye Tian didn't explain and casually asked. When I died, my lifespan was only 23,456 years. Adding the over 300,000 years of sleep, my lifespan is close to 400,000 years. Di Shi thought seriously and said. Nye Tian swallowed his saliva. This was the real advantage of a race. Humans cultivated desperately, even if they reached the peak of the heavenly emperor realm, they would at most have a lifespan of 1,000 years. As for the golden dragon, it could easily live for tens of thousands of years. After death, its dragon soul would not be extinguished. It was completely incomparable to humans. If Nye Tian knew this, he wouldn't have asked. It was too much of a blow. In this way, I'm much older than you. At this moment, Di Shi suddenly understood something and said loudly, From now on, you are my second brother. Second brother? Hearing this title, Nye Tian immediately felt uncomfortable and said with a chuckle, Big brother Di Shi, you should just call me Nye Tian. Second brother, why did this title make one's imagination run wild? Okay. Dishi's voice was like thunder. Big brother will listen to you. Nye Tion's face was filled with black and white lines. This guy was really impolite. At this moment, Duanmu Bai also noticed something. He suddenly found that the relationship between Nye Tian and Di Shi suddenly became very good. One man and one dragon, in the blink of an eye, they were wearing the same pant. Nye Tian. Suddenly, Di Shi seemed to think of something. The huge dragon head shook, and then several rays of golden light appeared. The golden light slowly flowed in the air, and after a moment, it condensed together. It was actually a huge golden dragon scale. This is... Nye Tian felt the powerful aura inside the golden dragon scale, and his face couldn't help but stiffen. When the golden dragon scale appeared, Di Shi's expression became serious. His booming voice was mixed with a trace of trembling as he said, "This is the Dragon Emperor's Heart Protection Dragon Scale." Chapter 387. Heart Protecting Dragon Scale. Hearing Di Shi's voice, Nye Tian stared at the golden dragon scale in the air with his eyes wide open. Not only was Nye Tian's eyes wide open, but Little Nine, Corpse Demon King and Phantom Snowfox in the chaotic original coffin were also dumbfounded. Squeak! Little Nine let out a squeak, and then there was no sound below it. Duanmu Bai watched from the side. Although he didn't know what the golden dragon scale was, he could feel the terrifying aura contained within it. He was also shocked beyond words. Yes. Seeing Nye Tian's reaction, Di Shi said, "It seems that you know what the heart-protecting dragon scale is. I won't say more." Of course Nye Tian knew what the heart-protecting dragon scale was. The reason why the Divine Dragon clan was so overbearing was because the dragon's body was incomparably hard. Its defense was even more terrifying than a level 9 armor. More terrifyingly, even if the dragon's body was injured, it could heal quickly. It could be called indestructible. However, the divine dragon body had a fatal weakness, and that was the dragon's heart in the chest. The dragon's heart was the divine dragon's fatal weakness. It was the place where all the dragon's chi and blood gathered. Once it was destroyed, the whole body would be affected. Not only could the dragon not recover, but the dragon's body would also be destroyed. Even the dragon's soul would disappear. Therefore, the heart-protecting dragon scale was the toughest part of the dragon's armor. And this heart-protecting dragon scale was called the dragon's reverse scale because it protected the dragon's weakness. Touching the dragon's reverse scale would mean death. It was precisely this heart-protecting dragon scale. And the dragon scale that Di Shi took out was the Golden Dragon Emperor's heart-protecting dragon scale. Its terrifying level was self-evident. Even after hundreds of thousands of years, the terrifying aura still made one's heart tremble. The Dragon Emperor gave his heart-protecting dragon scale to Di Shi, showing his trust in the latter. Di Shi took out the dragon scale, and his expression turned solemn. He said, "When the Dragon Emperor gave me the mission, he tore off the heart-protecting dragon scale and gave it to me. I, Di Shi, failed to live up to the trust your majesty had given me." Di Shi was extremely moved, and he only calmed down after a long time before he said, "Your majesty's heart-protecting dragon scale has lost the nourishment of draconic chi for too long, and it has long since lost its brilliance from all those years ago." Nye Tian glanced at the shining golden dragon scales in front of him, and his throat rolled. The Dragon Emperor's heart-protecting dragon scales could still maintain such a radiance even without the nourishment of dragon chi for over 300,000 years. If it was the Dragon Emperor, wouldn't it really be able to compete with the sun and the moon? It would absolutely be a rhythm that blinded everyone's eyes. Nye Tian. At this time, Emperor Shi looked at Ji Hao seriously and said, "The heart-protecting dragon scale of Dragon Emperor has a special connection with the Dragon Spring. As long as it is within 100 miles of the Dragon Spring, it will definitely have a reaction. Holy shit. Di Shi doesn't want to give me the Dragon Emperor's heart-protecting dragon scale, does he?" Nye Tian looked at Di Shi's expression, and when he heard this, he couldn't help but cry out in his heart. His mind was blown, and he couldn't hear what she was saying anymore. His mind started to wander. Oh my God! The Dragon Emperor's heart-protecting dragon scale. Even if the 9 emperors of the heaven realm joined hands, it would still be impossible to destroy it. If he could get the heart-protecting dragon scale and refine a set of armor, wouldn't he be invincible in the world? Nye Tian. Shi saw Nye Tian was stunned, and couldn't help but call out. Ah! Nye Tian recovered his mind and said, Big brother Shi, please continue. At this time, Shi looked at Nye Tian strangely and continued. His Majesty Dragon Emperor set up a contract between me and the heart-protecting dragon scale, so the dragon scale can't leave my side. Once it leaves, it will definitely wither. The Dragon Emperor did this because he was worried that other people would get the heart-protecting dragon scale. Nye Tian was speechless, and his eyelids drooped. After a long time, it turned out that the heart-protecting dragon scale couldn't leave Shi's side. Nye Tian rolled his eyes and said with an expression, Then why did you take it out? Are you sure you're not showing off? Shi didn't care and continued, I will now inject a piece of the aura of the heart-protecting dragon scale into your body. This way, even if you don't have the heart-protecting dragon scale, you will still be able to sense the existence of the dragon spring vein. Okay. Nye Tian was very excited and nodded heavily, comforting himself in his heart. Even if I can't get the heart-protecting dragon scale, getting a bit of dragon scale aura is also good. It can protect me at critical times. Shi activated the heart-protecting dragon scale, and a stream of dragon scale aura flowed into Nye Tian's body. Immediately, Nye Tian felt refreshed, as if all the pores on his body had opened up, and there was an indescribable comfort in his body. He even felt a surge of power wandering in his body, cleansing all his yuan meridians and strengthening all his bones. Just a bit of dragon scale aura had such an effect. How terrifying was the entire dragon scale. Damn Dragon Emperor, why did he come up with a bullsh** T-bond? Isn't he just looking for trouble? Nye Tian reluctantly looked at the heart-protecting dragon scale, and cursed Shi's Dragon Emperor in his heart. Shi immediately took back the heart-protecting dragon scale, and then said to Nye Tian, Nye Tian, I am now in the form of a dragon soul. I can't be exposed to the surface for too long. I need to return to the underground immediately. Nye Tian nodded slightly, still a little reluctant in his heart. Shi said, Don't worry, with me guarding Heaven Luo City, any foreign enemies who come to invade, I will make sure they won't be able to return. This sentence, Shi didn't say it to Nye Tian alone, but directly shouted it out. The shocking dragon roar resounded beyond the clouds of the 9 heavens, and it was estimated that half of the Nanshan region could hear the dragon roar. Nye Tian nodded with satisfaction. His big brother wasn't stupid. This last dragon roar was obviously for others to hear. The deterrent power was definitely much more terrifying than the Qianquan stone. It probably wouldn't take more than half a day for the entire Nanshan region, or even the entire 3,000 small worlds, to spread the news that Heaven Luo City was guarded by an ancient dragon soul. Once such news spread, absolutely no one would dare to covet Heaven Luo City anymore. Nye Tian, Big Brother is leaving. Take care. Shi didn't stay any longer. His huge dragon body tumbled up into the sky, and in the next moment, he swooped down. When he was about to hit the ground, he immediately turned into a golden light curtain that covered the earth, surged into the ground, and quickly disappeared. Nye Tian looked at the ground, and only calmed down after a long time. Duanmu Bai was also stunned for a long time, and then walked to Nye Tian's side, finally unable to suppress the curiosity in his heart, and asked tentatively, Nye Tian City Lord, what did that giant dragon say to you just now? I think you had a good chat. Nye Tian turned to look at Duanmu Bai, smiled strangely, and said, Palace Lord Duanmu, do you really want to know? This. Duanmu Bai was stunned for a moment, but in his mind, he remembered what Shi had said before. Some things can't be heard and can't be known. Since she said those words to Nye Tian alone, it was, of course, an extremely secretive matter. Thinking of this, Duanmu Bai's face turned pale, and then he smiled awkwardly and said, I'd better not know. Chapter 388. 3 days later, late at night. The moon was on a silver plate, and the sky was filled with stars. Heaven Luo City's city lord's mansion, in a small courtyard. 2 figures stood facing each other, but did not speak. Rui Qianyu, have you thought it through? Do you really want to leave? After a long time, Nye Tian broke the silence. The dragon blood martial meet had already ended for 3 days, the dragon blood stones and various rewards had all been distributed, and the martial meet could be considered to have ended satisfactorily. Most of the people had already left Heaven Luo City, and at the same time, they brought out a piece of news. Heaven Luo City was protected by the ancient golden dragon battle spirit. Once this news was out, the originally restless forces would definitely keep quiet out of fear. This was what Nye Tian wanted to see. In these 3 days, after Nye Tian had arranged some matters, he had been in seclusion to recuperate from his injuries, and at the same time, to stabilize his strength. Today, he had just come out of seclusion, and Rui Qianyu came to find him, and actually came to bid farewell, which was out of Nye Tian's expectations. At this time, Rui Qianyu still had the power of the blood devouring in her body. Even with the suppression of the dragon blood, it was only temporary. Once the dragon blood was used up, the power of the blood devouring would definitely cause an even more ferocious backlash. Nye Tian guessed that Elder Li's death must have been a huge blow to Rui Qianyu, so she chose to leave. Speaking of which, Elder Li had died to save Nye Tian, so Rui Qianyu's decision made him feel even more guilty. Rui Qianyu had completely recovered her previous coldness, and the ripples in her heart, because of Elder Li's death, were once again frozen. There was no emotion on her face, and her voice was cold and unapproachable as she said, "Thank you for your dragon blood. You don't have to feel guilty about Elder Li's death. I hope that after I leave, you can protect the 3 brothers of the Lei clan." Her tone was calm, without any ripples, but it revealed an irreversible determination. Nye Tian knew that Rui Qianyu had already made up her mind, and there was nothing he could say now. After thinking for a moment, Nye Tian took out a large bottle of dragon blood. This was the dragon blood that Gu Yi had just sent over, and it was still warm. There were 300 to 400 drops of it. Nye Tian already had 50% of the dragon blood stones. Adding to the 20% reward he received as the champion of the martial gathering, Rui Qianyu's reward, and the dragon blood from Tong Fu, Tang 13, Duanmu Lu, Aoki Lily, Ding Yifan and the others, all of them were plundered by him. Currently, he only had this big bottle with him. The rest were still in the dragon blood stone, and had yet to be refined. This dragon blood is enough for you to suppress your blood devour power for 1 month, said Nye Tian as he handed it over. Rui Qianyu didn't refuse and reached out to take it. Don't worry, Nye Tian said, nodding. I'll make sure the 3 Lei brothers stay in Heaven Luo City. I won't let anything happen to them. Immediately afterwards, he seemed to recall something, and took out a green vine. The green vine was emitting spots of green light. There was also a strange light that emitted an abnormally terrifying aura. Nye Tian smiled bitterly and said, "This is one of the 5 rank 9 spiritual weapons we obtained from the Bloody Massacre ancient tomb, Green Phoenix Vine Halo. It is very suitable for you. I originally wanted to let Jean de Bao seal it before giving it to you, but it seems like there is no time to seal it now." Rui Qianyu nodded and reached out to take it. Nye Tian warned, "Green Phoenix Vine Halo is a rank 9 Emperor weapon. The Emperor Light is very strong. Do not use it unless you have no other choice. Also, rank 9 Emperor weapons attract attention easily. Do not expose it." "I understand," Rui Qianyu replied calmly. Nye Tian nodded. He didn't know what to say next. He knew that Rui Qianyu must be in a hurry to go out and train. Staying in Tianluo City to live a comfortable life was obviously not what she wanted. Next, Rui Qianyu didn't leave in a hurry. Instead, she stood with Nie Tian. The two of them stood side by side under the moonlight. The two shadows didn't move, didn't speak, and didn't move. They just stood there quietly. After a while, Rui Qianyu turned around and left. Under the moonlight, Nie Tian watched as the figure got further and further away from him and gradually disappeared. There was an inexplicable sense of loss in his heart. Corpse Luo, is it really the right choice for her to leave now? When Rui Qianyu's aura completely disappeared, Nie Tian murmured. Although it looked like he was asking Corpse Luo Demon Lord, he was actually asking himself. Master. Corpse Luo Demon Lord knew that Nie Tian was worried. He stroked his beard and said with a serious face, Lady Qianyu is a person with the 9 color pupils. In the words of our demon clan's high priest, she has the heavenly fate. She will definitely be fine. I hope so. Nie Tian smiled bitterly. He then glanced at Corpse Luo Demon Lord in the chaotic original coffin and thought to himself, is this little guy really the demon lord who devoured hundreds of thousands of martial artists' origin spirits? As the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps. One walks the path of the person one follows. Corpse Luo Demon Lord had been influenced by Nie Tian during this period of time when he followed Nie Tian. He was no longer as violent as before. Gao Han went to Moyang City to pick up the Nie clan. He should be back tomorrow. 9th sister will definitely be happy to see her family. Nie Tian thought of something that was worth celebrating, and a smile finally appeared on his face. He had offended many forces. It was hard to guarantee that some forces would inquire about his origin and then go to Moyang City to make things difficult for the Nie clan. To be on the safe side, Nie Tian decided to move the entire Nie clan to Tianluo City. Tianluo City was now guarded by Emperor Shi. No force dared to act rashly. It was definitely the safest city in the 3,000 small world. Nie Tian did not go in person because he was afraid that the target would be too big. Therefore, he only sent Gao Han to carry his handwritten letter. Next, Nie Tian certainly had other plans. More than half a year had passed since the 3-year agreement with Mo Rushi. There were still 2.5 years left. There was still a monstrous genius waiting to duel with Nie Tian in Su Mi Lingdu. Nie Tian still remembered that Mou's strength was at true element level 9 half a year ago. He did not know what her strength was now. She should already be at the spirit wheel realm. Even if Nie Tian was in his best state, he would not be able to compete with a spirit wheel realm warrior. Nie Tian could not let Mo Rushi down. Therefore, he had to seize the time to improve his strength. After the Nie clan arrived, Nie Tian prepared to leave Tianluo City and go to the other 3 domains to gain experience. He also planned to bring Duanmu Lu along. As for Zhang Yifeng, he would let him stay in Tianluo City. Next, there would be an alchemist conference in Danwu City. Nie Tian was not interested, but Zhang Yifeng was very interested. He still wanted to shine in the alchemist conference. Nie Tian would let her stay in Tianluo City first. It would be too dangerous to let her go out with him. Now, Nie Tian's reputation was too big. The Ling Xian Tian Pavilion's assassins and Heaven Burial Society's people were all waiting for him. He would probably be chased after the moment he left Tianluo City. Nie Tian was also preparing to find a teacher for Nie during this trip to the other 3 realms. Originally, Nie Tian felt that Rui Qianyu was a good choice. But the latter had already left, so there was no other way. City Lord. Just as Nie Tian was lost in thought, a voice suddenly sounded. Chapter 389. The next day, in the evening. In the City Lord's residence. Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu were already sitting on the back of a 4 to 5 meter tall white bird. This bird was called the Sky Feather Eagle, a type of second-rank spirit beast. It had a gentle temperament and was tamed by humans, becoming a commonly seen flying mount. The Sky Feather Eagle was rented by Nie Tian from the Yuan Chamber of Commerce. At this moment, he and Duanmu Lu were preparing to leave. They were going to another region of the 3,000 small worlds, the North Sea region. Nie Tian heard from Gu Yi that there was a chaos city in the North Sea region. It was near the number 1 mountain range of the 3,000 small worlds, Hung Duan Tian. Chaos City was one of the dangerous places in the 3,000 small worlds, and its reputation was similar to the land of bloody massacre. Nie Tian wanted to go to such a dangerous place to gain experience. In his previous life, besides fighting, his hobby was to create all kinds of forbidden places in the heaven realm. In this life, this hobby had not changed. More importantly, Gu Yi revealed a secret to Nie Tian. It was rumored that the headquarters of Ling Xian Tian Pavilion was in Chaos City, but no one could prove it. Nie Tian was very interested in Chaos City and was heading there now. Big brother Nie Tian, you have to come back soon. Rower will definitely train hard and protect big brother Nie Tian when she grows up. Nie Yuro's big eyes were filled with tears, her face red, and she was indescribably sad. Don't cry, ninth sister. Your face won't look good if you cry. Nie Tian smiled faintly and looked at Qiu Shan and Nie Wenyuan. Qiu Shan nodded heavily and said, Don't worry, mister, Qiu Shan will not let you down. At this time, Qiu Shan's broken left arm had been replaced with the dragon blade arm. The day he got the dragon blade arm, Nie Tian let Gu Yi attach it to Qiu Shan. Qiu Shan's strength had soared after getting the dragon blade arm, and his training speed would also increase rapidly under the influence of the Dragon Blade Arm's Dragon Chi. Nie Tian had already instructed Qiu Shan that when he was not around, everything in Heaven Luo City would be decided by the latter. Moreover, he gave Qiu Shan a mission, and that was to guide Nie Yuro in her cultivation. At the moment, Qiu Shan was quite suitable to be Nie Yuro's teacher. At the very least, he could guide her in her cultivation. Patriarch, this old man won't do anything. I'll just live out my remaining years in peace. Nie Wenyuan, the great elder of the Nie family, chuckled. The Nie family had already moved into the Heaven Luo City's City Lord's mansion last night. Nie Wenyuan looked at Nie Tian with endless emotions. In just half a year, the youth from back then had grown to a height that he could not comprehend. Fortunately, Nie Wenyuan had stood out to support Nie Tian back then. Otherwise, the Nie family would have lost a super powerful family head. Nie Tian nodded. Then, he turned to look at Jean de Bao, who gave him a heartless smile and said, Boss, I can't fully control my 3,000 divine and devil seals. I can't seal the thing you gave me yet. You can't even seal a few weapons? Is your 3,000 divine and demon seals that trashy? Nie Tian said with a frown. Damn. Boss, that's... Jean de Bao chuckled and swallowed the rest of his words. Nie Tian gave him the remaining 3 rank 9 spiritual weapons and told him to use the 3,000 demon god seals to suppress their power to around rank 5 spiritual weapons. I don't care what it is. Anyway, when I come back, you must do it well. Nie Tian waved his hand and didn't want to talk nonsense with Jean de Bao. All right. Jean de Bao's face darkened, but he could only nod. Nie Tian smiled and said, Tell Yifeng that when I come back, I hope to see him as a rank 4 alchemist. Zhang Yifeng was still in seclusion to comprehend the true meaning of alchemy from the Purple Sun Pill Cauldron, preparing for the alchemy conference. Because of the dragon blood martial meet, Gu Yi delayed the alchemy conference in Danwu City. Nie Tian estimated that with Zhang Yifeng's current mental strength, after he came out of seclusion, he should be close to a rank 4 alchemist. It wouldn't be too much for him to casually take first place in the alchemy competition. Then, Nie Tian bid farewell to Qiu Ling and the 3 lay brothers. After a while, the Sky Feather Eagle soared into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Qiu Shan and the others looked at the white line in the sky for a long time before they left. 5 days later. North Sea Region, Great Chu Empire. On a straight official road, the figures of 2 youths appeared. These two youths were none other than Ye Tian and Duanmu Lu. They had just alighted from the Sky Feather Eagle, and were still covered in dust. The Sky Feather Eagle was rented from the Great Yuan Chamber of Commerce. After Nye Tian and Jean de Bao got off, it would fly back to Danwu City on its own. Teacher, are we in the Great Chu Empire of the North Sea region? Duanmu Lu was a little dizzy. After 5 days and 5 nights of flying, he was about to vomit. He swore in his heart that he would never ride the Sky Feather Eagle again. The Great Chu Empire was one of the 9 first-rate empires of the North Sea region. It was powerful, and its influence was almost comparable to the Nanshan region's deity transformation sect and Qiankuan Palace. However, the real overlord of the North Sea region was the Battle Cloud sect. The Battle Cloud sect was known as the #1 sect in the North Sea region. Among the 9 first-rate empires of the North Sea region, 3 were affiliated with the Battle Cloud sect, while the other 6 were affiliated with the 4 great clans. No matter how strong these first-rate empires were, if they were not affiliated with stronger sects or clans, it would be difficult for them to survive. The Great Chu Empire was one of the 3 great empires affiliated with the Battle Cloud sect. And Nye Tian nodded, looking at the city gate not far away, and said, "Ahead is the imperial capital of the Great Chu Empire, Chuyang City." The reason why Nye Tian wanted to land in the Great Chu Empire was because the Great Chu Empire and Chaos City shared a common border. He had heard from Gu Yi that many people who wanted to go to Chaos City would first form a team in the Great Chu Empire's imperial capital, Chuyang City, and then obtain a city pass to enter Chaos City before they could enter. Therefore, the master and disciple decided to stop in Chuyang City first, and then think of a way to enter Chaos City. Teacher, it seems that the Great Chu Empire is an empire affiliated with the Battle Cloud sect. Duanmu Lu suddenly thought of something, and actually got a little excited. He said, "Maybe we can meet Brother Jean in Chuyang City." Nye Tian nodded slightly. Of course, he knew that the Brother Jean that Duanmu Lu mentioned was Zhan Xiaoi. Zhan Xiaoi was the young sect leader of the Battle Cloud sect, and they might really meet him in Chuyang City. After a while, the figures of Nye Tian and Duanmu Lu appeared in Chuyang City. The two of them were going to find a tavern to stay at first, and have a good night's rest. Then, they would think about how to enter Chaos City. "Ah, what are you doing? Don't touch me." The two of them were walking on the busy street when a scream rang out not far away. The voice was a little sharp, and it was obviously a woman. Nye Tian and Duanmu Lu frowned slightly, and looked in the direction of the voice. On the street, 3 well-dressed men surrounded a teenage girl. Their eyes were full of lust, and the corners of their mouths were overflowing with saliva. They actually started to get physical. "How dare you? How dare you molest a girl in the street in broad daylight? Do you still have any respect for the law?" At this time, someone stood up. It was a handsome young man in his 20s. Bam! As soon as that person's voice fell, one of the 3 well-dressed men struck out with his palm, and actually hit the handsome young man's face directly. The latter screamed and fell to the ground with a thud, his eyes filled with terror. The well-dressed man who struck out was arrogant. He pointed at the crowd of onlookers and shouted unscrupulously, "Go to the south and north of the street, and find out who the father is. On this street, no woman that I, Lu Zhenyuan, fancy can escape." Chapter 390. The well-dressed man called Lu Zhenyuan laughed wildly after he finished his rant, completely taking the angry gazes of the crowd as praise. "Let me tell you, bunch of country bumpkins." Another man stood up behind Lu Zhenyuan. He was obviously his underling, and he was even crazier than his elder brother. "Do you know the name of this street? Zhenyuan Street. It's named after my boss. On this street, my boss is the law, the rules, and everything. If anyone is unconvinced, stand up immediately. He's an example." With that, the man kicked the handsome man who had fallen to the ground. Bang! A muffled sound rang out, and the man spat out a mouthful of blood. The girl who was bullied was about 15 years old. She had a clear and bright appearance, and her facial features were elegant. Her clothes were simple, and it was obvious that she came from an ordinary family. At this moment she was sobbing, and her face was full of tears. She looked at Lu Jinyuan and the other two people in front of her in fear. Some people in the crowd recognized Lu Jinyuan, and they whispered to each other. So he's Lu Jinyuan. He's the brother-in-law of the crown prince. No wonder he's so arrogant. That's right. I heard that a few days ago, he teased General Gu at the crown prince's residence and was beaten up by General Gu. Why did he come out to harm people again? Sigh. Lu Jinyuan has the crown prince's support, so how would General Gu dare to really beat him up? At most, she's just scaring him. Lu Jinyuan obviously heard the discussion around him, and his expression changed. Especially when he heard the name General Gu, a cold, murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He said fiercely in his heart, "Gu Wuyo, it's your fortune that this young master has taken a liking to you. Don't think that just because you're the only female general of the great Chu Empire that you're amazing. If you fall into this young master's hands, I'll make you beg for death." So the General Gu that the crowd was talking about was called Gu Wuyo, and she was a woman. "Young Master Lu, I beg you, please spare me. I'll never come to this street again." At this moment, the girl on the ground started sobbing pitifully. "Young lady, don't be afraid. This young master has no ill intentions. Look at how tender and fair you are. This young master can't wait to dote on you. How could I bear to hurt you?" Lu Jinyuan's eyes wandered up and down the girl's body without the slightest scruple. As he spoke, he reached out with his perverted hands, scaring the girl into retreating and shrinking into a ball. "Little girl, don't be afraid. Follow this young master back to the mansion. I guarantee that you'll wish you were dead. You won't want to leave this young master for the rest of your life." Lu Jinyuan chuckled, his saliva almost dripping down to his chin. The woman was so scared that she started crying. Her eyes were filled with pain and despair. Her name was Li Jiao, and she was just a girl from an ordinary family with no power or influence. Facing this kind of person, even if she was really defiled, she could only endure it. It was estimated that in the end, she would only provoke others. "Hee, little girl, let this young master treat you well." Lu Jinyuan walked over and stretched out his pig trotters, his saliva almost dripping onto the ground. Li Jiao folded her arms in front of her chest and closed her eyes in despair. Bang! At this moment, a swift and fierce energy pierced through the air and directly shook off Lu Jinyuan's pig hands. Swoosh! A figure immediately appeared and blocked in front of Li Jiao. Lu Jinyuan retreated several steps, his face filled with shock. He immediately saw that the person who appeared in front of him was actually a teenager. He smiled coldly and roared, "Where did this little bastard come from? How dare you ruin this young master's plans? Are you tired of living?" The young master who suddenly appeared was none other than Duanmu Lu. "You're the one who doesn't want to live!" Duanmu Lu roared angrily. Immediately, his whole body was filled with rage. Although Lu Jinyuan and the other two were only in their early 20s, they were already martial artists at the 9th level of the all-creation realm. With such strength, they actually dared to bully an ordinary girl on the street. They were worse than pigs and dogs. Duanmu Lu was originally bursting with a sense of justice. How could he endure this kind of situation now? He roared angrily, wishing that he could directly kill the other party. "Wait! Let me do it!" Just as Duanmu Lu was about to make a move, a voice suddenly rang out. Slap! 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 Immediately, a ghost-like figure appeared. 3 palm shadows immediately appeared in the air, followed by 3 crisp, slapping sounds. Half of Lu Jinyuan and the other two's faces immediately became red and swollen. One could actually see the scarlet handprints on their faces. It was clear how solid the slap was. "Teacher! Duanmu Lu couldn't help but be stunned when he saw that the person who appeared next to him was none other than Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled faintly and patted Duanmu Lu's shoulder. "My good disciple, in the future, it's better to let this old man do this kind of face-slapping thing. I'm more experienced in dealing with these young masters." Duanmu Lu's face darkened. He didn't know what to say. Nie Tian really liked to play with these self-righteous young masters. These young masters of rich and powerful families always thought that they were high and mighty. Every day they wanted to be arrogant and show off. They wanted the whole city to smell their fart when they burp. The trick to dealing with these kind of young masters who bullied the weak and feared the strong was one word: face-slapping. Slap them until they submitted, slap them until they were afraid, slap them until they cried. If that still didn't work, then slap them until they died. The sudden scene caused Lu Zhenyuan and the other two to panic. Their eyes revealed a look of terror at the same time. But when they saw clearly that it was another youth who appeared this time, the terror in their eyes immediately turned into shock. The three of them were all 9th level all-manifestation martial artists. They didn't see clearly how Nie Tian appeared, how he attacked, and how he slapped their faces. It was like seeing a ghost. Who are you?" One of the fellows behind Lu Zhenyuan calmed down and gathered his courage to ask. "Slap." Nie Tian didn't say anything. He directly slapped through the air again. The other half of that fellow's face swelled up. This time it was balanced. "You little brat, do you know that I'm—" Lu Zhenyuan was furious. He couldn't bear the fact that a young man suddenly appeared out of nowhere and humiliated him and his men. Unfortunately, he was interrupted before he could finish his sentence. Slap. Nie Tian slapped Lu Zhenyuan's face again. "Brat, do you know that I slap? You slap. Slap. Slap." The sound of slaps rang out. Lu Zhenyuan's head was slapped crookedly. One side of his face was already a bloody mess. If he continued to be slapped, his facial bones would probably be broken. When Nie Tian stopped, Lu Zhenyuan didn't dare to say another word. He looked at Nie Tian with a frightened face. His swollen face was pressed into a thin line, and his eyes were filled with tears. He looked extremely aggrieved. He was probably starting to miss his mother. The surrounding crowd was all stunned. A youth suddenly ran out and, without saying anything, directly slapped them in the face. This scene was really too exciting. Everyone's heart was surging with one word: so King Cool. Chapter 391. Hearing the cold voice, Lu Zhenyuan and the other two felt their hair stand on end. However, what was even colder than the voice was Nie Tian's eyes. Lu Zhenyuan and the other two felt the bone-chilling coldness in Nie Tian's eyes, making them feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. The most important thing was that Nie Tian's strength was too strange. He didn't give them any chance to fight back at all. With a series of slaps, the 3 9th-level all-manifestation realm martial artists were so dizzy that they couldn't even find their bearings. Lu Zhenyuan couldn't see through Nie Tian's strength and could only guess in his heart that the latter's strength was definitely above the true energy realm. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to not even have a chance to fight back. However, Nie Tian looked to be only 16 or 17 years old. Was it possible for a 16-year-old true energy realm martial artist? Lu Zhenyuan subconsciously thought it was impossible because such talent could be compared to the 3 monstrous geniuses of the Sumeru spirit capital. However, Duanmu Lu clearly called Nie Tian teacher. He couldn't see through the former's strength, but it was at least higher than his. As his teacher, it was normal for the latter to be at the true energy realm. Could it be that this guy cultivates some heaven-defying martial skill that can keep his appearance young? Lu Zhenyuan had a guess in his heart and immediately confirmed it. That's right. This guy must be an old monster. He just looks young. Actually, his guess could be considered wrong because Nie Tian was indeed an old monster. However, it wasn't because he cultivated some heaven-defying martial skill, but because he was reborn. Lu Jinyuan couldn't think of this even if he cracked his head. Duanmu saw that Lu Jinyuan and the other two were completely scared by Nie Tian and went forward to ask, "Teacher, how should we deal with these three guys?" "Destroy their yuan meridians," Nie Tianling said coldly, then locked his gaze on Lu Jinyuan and said coldly, "Castrate this guy." Duanmu broke out in a cold sweat. Nie Tian was too ruthless. How could he know that Nie Tian's current method was already considered light? Otherwise, how could Lu Jinyuan and the other two still be alive? "Sir, don't." When Lu Jinyuan and the other two heard Nie Tian's words, their faces turned pale. They knelt down at the same time and begged bitterly. "Now you know fear. Where did your arrogance go? Go to the south and north streets and find out who the father is. I wouldn't want someone like you even if you were my grandson." Nie Tianling rebuked coldly without a shred of sympathy in his eyes. Sympathizing with these guys was simply torturing his feelings. "Do it." Nie Tian stopped talking and said to Duanmu cold. "Yes." Duanmu nodded solemnly. A beam of sword energy appeared in his palm, and he blasted it towards a young man in luxurious clothes. "No. I don't want my elemental meridians to be crippled." The young man stood up and ran. "Pooh!" Nie Tian's body shook slightly, and a beam of sword energy shot out. The young man's chest was pierced by the sword energy, and he fell to the ground. Fresh blood dyed the ground red. His body twitched a few times, and he lost all signs of life. Spare me, I won't dare to do it again." Lu Jinyuan and the other young man saw this and kowtowed crazily, begging bitterly. Duanmu was momentarily stunned, and he hesitated. But Nie Tian's expression was resolute, and he didn't leave any room for negotiation. Even if Lu Jinyuan made a basin on the ground, Nie Tian wouldn't let him off. "What are you waiting for? Do it." Nie Tianling looked at Duanmu coldly, his face cold. Duanmu was a person with extraordinary talent, a tenacious temperament, and a strong sense of justice. Unfortunately, he was too soft-hearted sometimes, and he would hold back even when facing his enemies. In a real battle, this was a big taboo. If his opponent was similar in strength to him, but was cruel and merciless, not only would Duanmu lose, but he would also die. He couldn't be so lucky forever, and he couldn't always meet an upright opponent like Zhang Xiaoyi. Therefore, Nie Tian wanted to nurture Duanmu murderous heart at this moment. Protecting the good is a virtue, getting rid of the evil is also a virtue. Seeing Nie Tian's resolute face, Duanmu immediately became ruthless. He shouted angrily, and a beam of sword energy whistled out, hitting the young man beside Lu Jinyuan. The young man screamed in pain, and instantly felt his yuan meridians being destroyed. His heart turned cold, and he directly fainted. "It's your turn." Duanmu eyes were even colder, and he locked his gaze on Lu Jinyuan. "Benefactor, please don't hurt him." However, at this time, Li Jiao who was being bullied, suddenly pounced over, and stood in front of Lu Jinyuan. Duanmu was stunned for a moment, and his face was full of astonishment. He didn't know why this woman wanted to protect the enemy who had bullied her. Nie Tian glanced at Li Jiao and of course he knew why she wanted to protect Lu Jinyuan. Lu Jinyuan was the crown prince's brother-in-law, and if he was injured by Nie Tian and Duanmu and the two of them just left, who would Lu Jinyuan and the crown prince vent their anger on? Of course, it would be Li Jiao. If that happened, not only would Li Jiao suffer, but her family, relatives, and friends would also suffer. Li Jiao could be considered smart, and she must have thought that if she pleaded for Lu Jinyuan, he would be grateful and let her go. Unfortunately, she was completely wrong. With Lu Jinyuan's personality, as soon as Nie Tian left, he would vent all his anger on Li Jiao. This was the sorrow of the weak, and they could only be trampled on by the strong. Big fish eat small fish, and small fish eat shrimps. The weak were prey to the strong, and the eternal law of the jungle. There was no right or wrong, no right or wrong. The strong were respected. This was the way of survival in this world. Simple, direct, barbaric, violent. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said directly, "Miss, don't be afraid, we won't leave, we still have to wait for the crown prince behind this guy to come and take revenge. Sir, he is the brother-in-law of our great Chu Empire's crown prince, please don't hurt him, I beg you." Li Jiao Er cried sincerely, and her pretty face was pale. Duanmu Bai was slightly dazed, he didn't think so much. Humph. Nye Tianling smiled coldly, and said domineeringly, "I don't care about the great Chu Empire's crown prince, even if he is the emperor of your great Chu Empire, he must pay the price today." In his previous life, the reason why Nye Tian could become the Heaven Realm's #1 war god, in addition to his monstrous battle strength, was because of his good military management. His subordinates, no matter who they were, as long as they violated the military law, even if they were his direct disciples, they must be punished. The law was like a mountain, rewards and punishments were clear. This was what it meant to rule the world. If the law was only the privilege of the rich and powerful, then what was the difference between them and prostitutes who could be trampled on by anyone? Evil must be eradicated. Therefore, Nye Tian wouldn't leave. He wanted to wait for the crown prince behind Lu Zhenyuan to come out. Condoning his brother-in-law to do evil, this crown prince was definitely not a good person. Li Jiao Er saw the chilling coldness in Nye Tian's eyes, and subconsciously moved away. "Cripple him." Nye Tian looked at Duanmu Lu, and gave a cold order. Duanmu Lu condensed a sword light in his palm, and without hesitation, he struck towards Lu Zhenyuan's dantian. "Stop!" At this time, a sharp voice sounded, and immediately after, an air force attacked, blocking Duanmu Lu's sword light. Nye Tian turned around and saw a valiant and heroic female general standing in front of him. Chapter 392. Nye Tian turned around to look at the female general who had suddenly appeared. She exuded a threatening heroic spirit, and the aura she exuded was even more unyielding than that of an ordinary man. Nye Tian had been with soldiers in his previous life, and he was also a soldier. The woman in front of him was definitely a righteous soldier. The burning and pressing heroic spirit that she exuded was definitely not deceiving. General Gu. Nye Tian seemed to have heard the onlookers mention this name earlier. It seemed like she was teased by Lu Zhenyuan in the crown prince's residence, and then beaten up. If this woman was the General Gu that everyone was talking about, then Lu Zhenyuan's lust was truly fearless. He actually dared to lust for such a heroic soldier. He was definitely courting death. The fact that General Gu did not kill him was already a benevolent bodhisattva. Nye Tian didn't guess wrongly. This heroic armored woman was the General Gu that everyone was talking about. General Gu was called Gu Wuyo, and she was the only female general of the great Chu Empire. What surprised Nye Tian even more was that this General Gu in front of him actually looked to be in his 20s, or even younger than that, and her strength was actually at the 9th level of the giant spirit realm. Nye Tian didn't know that the name Gu Wuyo was simply a legend in the great Chu Empire. Gu Wuyo's parents were both soldiers of the great Chu Empire, and both died on the battlefield. Gu Wuyo was born on the battlefield and lost her parents at a young age. She grew up under the care of countless soldiers, so even though she was a woman, her blood was more masculine and domineering than an ordinary man's. Gu Wuyo officially entered the battlefield at the age of 8, and she was already a somewhat famous general at the age of 12. By the age of 16, she was already a famous and ever-victorious general. So not only was she the only female general of the great Chu Empire, but she was also the youngest general in the history of the great Chu Empire. Gu Wuyo was transferred back to the imperial city by the emperor at the age of 18 to serve as the commander of the imperial guards. It had been more than a year since then. But Gu Wuyo's reputation as a general was too great, so even though she was now the commander of the imperial guards, The people of the Great Chu Empire still addressed her as General Gu. General Gu, they want to kill me, please save me. Seeing that his savior was here, Lu Zhenyuan knelt and crawled over with tears and snot, looking extremely pitiful. Gu Wuyo's eagle-like sharp gaze swept across the crowd and finally landed on Duanmulu, because it was the latter who had attacked Lu Zhenyuan earlier. He said coldly, "What's going on? Why do you want to kill him?" Duanmulu looked at Gu Wuyo and was actually stunned for a moment. He immediately reacted and said, "Miss, you've misunderstood. I don't want to kill him, I just want to destroy his yuan meridians." Nie Tian was speechless. He thought to himself, "My silly disciple, is there a big difference between destroying one's yuan meridians and killing someone?" In Duanmulu Gu, there, Duanmu Gu Tian Gu was Gu and Gu Gu Gu. However, in Gu Wuyo's eyes, Duanmulu's act of crippling Lu Zhenyuan's yuan meridians was no different from killing him. In fact, it was even crueler than killing him. And, at this time, Duanmulu opened his mouth again, but he didn't finish his sentence. "What else?" Gu Wuyo shouted cold. Duanmulu was startled and seemed a little embarrassed. He stuttered, "And that is, what is it?" When Gu Wuyo saw the man acting so bashful, she couldn't wait to pry open the man's mouth and pull the following words out of his mouth. "Also, castrate him," Duanmulu said quickly, not daring to look at Gu Wuyo's reaction. Nie Tian was speechless. He almost knelt down in front of Duanmulu and thought, "My dear disciple, is it really necessary to say this out loud?" Gu Wuyo didn't feel uncomfortable at all. He stared at Duanmulu and shouted, "Raise your head and tell me, why did you do this?" Duanmulu was dazed for a second and turned to look at Nie Tian with a pleading look. Nie Tian directly turned his face away, pretending he didn't see it. Gu Wuyo was talented, strong and had a good character. However, he had some difficulties in communicating with others. "General Gu, it's not this young master's fault." At this time, Li Jiao finally came out and said to Gu Wuyo, "It was young master Lu Zhenyuan and his men who flirted with this little girl. This young master just couldn't stand it, so he helped them." Gu Wuyo glanced at Li Jiao's clothes, then scanned the crowd with his sharp eyes. Although no one spoke, they all nodded subconsciously, indicating that Li Jiao was telling the truth. Gu Wuyo was very smart. He glanced at Lu Zhenyuan and immediately guessed what had happened. He scolded in a cold tone, "A dog can't stop eating **t. Lu Zhenyuan had flirted with Gu Wuyo in the Crown Prince's palace a few days ago, so Gu Wuyo naturally knew what he was like. Flirting with girls in the street was a common thing for Lu Zhenyuan. "Did you kill that person?" Gu Wuyo looked at the corpse not far away and asked Duanmulu. This corpse was killed by Nie Tian, and it had nothing to do with Duanmulu. However, Duanmulu was very honest, so he definitely wanted to take the blame for his teacher. He nodded and said, "Yes, I killed him." "Liar!" Gu Wuyo shouted coldly. He pointed at Nie Tian and said in a deep voice, "This person was obviously killed by him." Nie Tian was slightly startled. He immediately smiled and said, "General Gu, don't make irresponsible remarks without evidence." Gu Wuyo looked cold at Nie Tian and said, "This person is at the 9th level of the all-manifestation realm. Among those present, only the two of you have the ability to kill him. The position where he fell before he died was in a straight line with yours. This means that you were the one who killed him." Nie Tian was slightly surprised. He couldn't help but praise, "General Gu's observational skills are indeed amazing. I admire you." Gu Wuyo was able to guess that the killer was Nie Tian just by looking at the position where the person fell before he died. This kind of observational and analytical skills were indeed very impressive. Duanmulu was also stunned. He looked at Gu Wuyo speechlessly. His expression seemed to be saying, "Miss, can't you just let me take the blame for my teacher?" Seeing that Nie Tian had already admitted to killing someone, Gu Wuyo seemed to be thinking about something. She asked coldly, "Who are you people? Why have you come to my great Chu empire?" Gu Wuyo looked at Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu's age, and then looked at their strength. They were obviously not ordinary people. Therefore, she had reason to suspect that Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu might be spies from another country. Nie Tian glanced at Gu Wuyo. He knew that she was overthinking. He chuckled and said, "We're not from your North Sea region. We're from the South Mountain region." The South Mountain region had nothing to do with the North Sea region. Nie Tian said this to dispel Gu Wuyo's suspicions. The North Sea region and the South Mountain region are thousands of miles apart. Why have you come to my great Chu empire? Gu Wuyo continued to ask. Nie Tian smiled calmly and said, "I heard that the scenery in the great Chu empire is pretty good. Let's go sightseeing here. What do you say? Travel?" The doubt in Gu Wuyo's eyes deepened. She said coldly, "You're from the South Mountain region. You have nothing to do with this girl. Why did you save her?" Nie Tian smiled faintly. He pointed at Duanmu Lu and said fiercely, "This companion of mine has a strong sense of justice. He can't stand injustice. Wherever he goes, he wants to stick a shiny label on his forehead. I represent justice. Is this reason enough?" Chapter 393. I represent justice. Is this reason enough? Nie Tian's words were sharp and powerful. Well said. The onlookers raised their eyebrows, and someone actually shouted. Immediately, thunderous applause sounded. Everyone looked at Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu with satisfaction and praise. Some people started to discuss in low voices and pointed at Lu Zhenyuan. Lu Zhenyuan bullies people all day long just because he's a relative of the emperor. He's really despicable. The two young masters' attacks just now were really satisfying. Lu Zhenyuan should have been taught a lesson long ago. He's like dog sh*t. If it wasn't for his brother-in-law who's the crown prince, he would have been torn into pieces and turned into ashes. I wonder how General Gu will handle this. Is he afraid of the crown prince's power and doesn't dare to touch Lu Zhenyuan? I don't think so. General Gu is famous for being an iron-blooded general in the army. Now that he's the commander of the Imperial Guards, he must also hate evil. Nie Tian heard the crowd's discussion and raised his eyebrows. He looked at Gu Wuyo with a slightly proud expression. Gu Wuyo frowned and pointed at Duanmu Lu. She looked at Nie Tian with a serious expression and said, "I believe he's fighting for justice. But you're killing people with grass." Nie Tian's expression flickered with astonishment. Why was it that Duanmu Lu was fighting for justice, but when it came to him, it was killing people with grass? General Gu. Nie Tian didn't panic at all. He said, "Don't tell me you like my companion because he's handsome and you're bullying me on purpose?" Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and said seriously, "Do I look easy to bully?" "Teacher, don't." Hearing Nie Tian's words, Duanmu Lu was so embarrassed that he turned into a young man in love. His face was so red that it even reached his ears. Seeing Duanmu Lu's reaction, Nie Tian rolled his eyes and laughed in his heart. It was a wise choice to bring Duanmu Lu out. Otherwise, the journey will be much less fun. Gu Wuyo's expression was calm. His gaze shifted between Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu, and he said with a serious expression, "He's indeed more handsome than you. It's not strange that I like him." Nie Tian's eyes widened and he said in his heart, "Female general, you're not only handsome but also aggressive. Even if you really like Duanmu Lu, you don't have to say it in front of so many people. You're flirting with my precious apprentice." Hearing Gu Wuyo's words, Duanmu Lu's ears turned as red as a pig's ears, and his face was as red as a monkey's butt. Nie Tian looked at Duanmu Lu carefully. This young man was indeed very handsome, and he was honest and cute, which made him very attractive to girls. "My handsomeness is abstract, and ordinary people can't see it." Nie Tian thought for a while, then defended himself. Speaking of Nie Tian's appearance, he was at most above average. He could only be called handsome, but he was still far from being a handsome man. Luckily, with the dignity of the god of war, he was more domineering, which made up for his lack of handsomeness. You have to be bold and unrestrained just because you're abstract? Gu Wuyo looked at Nie Tian and said coldly, "That's not a good reason to kill people." Nie Tian was speechless. What was she talking about? Gu Wuyo's words actually got tangled up in the topic. "Miss, you misunderstood me. My teacher didn't kill people because of his abstract appearance." At this moment, Duanmu Lu stood up. The redness on his face had faded a little, and he explained on Nie Tian's behalf very seriously. Nie Tian rolled his eyes. Even if Gu Wuyo wasn't abstract, she still looked abstract. Then why did he kill people? Gu Wuyo asked coldly. Because of anger, Duanmu Lu said honestly. Humph. Gu Wuyo sneered coldly and said seriously. He killed people because of anger. Isn't that killing people? How can? Duanmu Lu still wanted to say something, but was stopped by Nie Tian. Nie Tian looked at Duanmu Lu with a depressed face, and thought to himself, Duanmu Lu, you're not a disciple, you're a little ancestor. If you continue to explain, I'm afraid I'm going to become a world-destroying monster. At this time, Gu Wuyo suddenly frowned and asked Nie Tian, "Are you his teacher?" She had heard Duanmu Lu call Nie Tian teacher just now, and thought that she had heard it wrong. Now that she saw Duanmu Lu being so respectful to Nie Tian, she couldn't help but feel strange. Nie Tian's strength was only at the 3rd level of the giant spirit realm, while Duanmu Lu's strength was at the 4th level of the giant spirit realm. Moreover, the two of them were similar in age, so it would be more appropriate to call them brothers. Don't you think so? Nie Tian smiled and asked back. Gu Wuyo said coldly, "It's indeed rare to see a teacher who is worse than his student." This doesn't seem to have anything to do with General Gu. Nie Tian didn't explain anything, and his face became slightly more serious. He said, "General Gu, I did kill him. Just tell me how you want to punish me." Nie Tian could see that with Gu Wuyo's military style, even if he killed someone who deserved to die, he still killed someone. Therefore, he definitely had to be punished, but he didn't know what the punishment was. Gu Wuyo said coldly, "It's a serious crime to kill someone on the streets in the Imperial City. According to the secret law, you should be sent back to the prison and wait to be executed." Executed? Hearing Gu Wuyo's words, everyone's eyes widened. Nie Tian killed someone who deserved to die. Shouldn't he be rewarded? Why did he have to be executed? Young lady, the people my teacher killed were bad people. They were people who deserved to die. Should they be executed as well? Duanmu Lu finally said something useful. Good people are people, bad people are also people. They are all human lives, there is no difference, Gu Wuyo said coldly. Humph. Nie Tian chuckled and asked back, General Gu, on the battlefield, companions are people, and enemies are also people. They are all human lives. Is there no difference? Gu Wuyo frowned and didn't know what to say for a while. He shouted in a deep voice, "You are twisting words and forcing logic. Teacher, let's go." Duanmu Lu was also angry. He said to Nie Tian and was ready to leave immediately. Li Jiao Er was scared at this time. She wanted to ask them to stay, but she didn't know what to say. If Nie Tian and the others left at this time, Li Jiao Er and her family would be completely doomed. Leave? Nie Tian smiled slightly and immediately looked at Lu Jinyuan coldly. This guy hasn't been dealt with yet, how can I be willing to leave? You still want to kill me? Lu Jinyuan noticed the cold, killing intent in Nie Tian's eyes, and his whole body trembled in fear. It's not that I still want to kill you, it's that I never give up. Nie Tian smiled coldly and glanced at Duanmu Lu, who immediately understood. Chapter 394. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 streaks of sword chi tore through the air and attacked from 2 different directions. Each of them carried a dense killing intent that caused people to shiver in fear. Gu Wuyo was caught between a rock and a hard place. She could sense that Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu's sword qi were extraordinarily powerful. Given her strength, it wouldn't be easy for her to block them at the same time. Pfft! Gu Wuyo didn't make a move. The two streaks of sword qi pierced through Lu Zhenyuan at the same time. Lu Zhenyuan had 2 bloody holes on his body. Blood gushed out like a fountain. He wanted to say something, but he didn't have the chance to. Now, he didn't need to worry about his Yuan meridians being destroyed anymore. He would die immediately. Seeing this scene, everyone was terrified. The Crown Prince's brother-in-law, a member of the royal family, had died in front of them. The visual impact was shocking. Gu Wuyo glared angrily at Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu as she roared, "How dare you two?" Nie Tian smiled and said, "General Gu, don't you want him to die too? Why are you being so pretentious?" Gu Wuyo had the chance to save Lu Zhenyuan, but she didn't. She was obviously trying to kill him with a borrowed knife. Gu Wuyo was in the 9th level of the giant spirit realm. It wasn't easy to block Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu's sword qi, but it wasn't difficult either. Unfortunately, she didn't do anything. She was obviously going easy on them. Gu Wuyo was a little angry that Nie Tian saw through her. She indeed didn't want to save Lu Zhenyuan. She chose to watch him die. It wasn't because Lu Zhenyuan had flirted with her a few days ago. It was because she thought that Lu Zhenyuan deserved to die. Lu Zhenyuan had a notorious reputation in the imperial city. He used his identity as a member of the royal family to act arrogantly and do whatever he wanted. If he was allowed to live, many girls in the imperial city would suffer. This was the real reason why Gu Wuyo didn't save Lu Zhenyuan. "Teacher, let's go." Seeing that Lu Zhenyuan had died, Duanmu Lu called out again and prepared to leave. With Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu's strength, if they wanted to leave, Gu Wuyo wouldn't be able to stop them. However, Nie Tian didn't plan to leave at all. He looked at Gu Wuyo and said, "General Gu, I killed the Crown Prince's brother-in-law. Put me in prison now." Gu Wuyo looked at Nie Tian with a strange expression. In reality, she had already made plans for Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu to escape. In any case, even if the two of them escaped, the emperor would at most blame her for her incompetence. However, Nie Tian's current actions greatly puzzled her. Not only did he not run after killing someone, he even took the initiative to ask to be locked up. Was there something wrong with this person's brain? Nie Tian didn't want to leave because he didn't want to implicate Li Jiao. If Lu Zhenyuan died, the crown prince would go crazy. If he couldn't find the murderer, he would definitely vent his anger on Li Jiao. Moreover, Nie Tian also wanted to meet this so-called crown prince of Great Chu. If he didn't get rid of this guy, he wouldn't feel at ease. "General Gu, let's go. Take me to your prison. To be honest, I rarely go to such a place. I'm itching to go." Nie Tian looked at Gu Wuyo, who was still in a daze, and smiled. There was no fear on his face, and he was indescribably relaxed. Gu Wuyo frowned even more. Nie Tian clearly knew Lu Zhenyuan's identity, but he still asked to go to prison. His brain must have been kicked by a donkey or squeezed by a door. Gu Wuyo knew that Lu Zhenyuan was not only the crown prince's brother-in-law, but also the Lu clan was a big clan in Chuyang City. The Lu clan leader only had one son, Lu Zhenyuan. If Nie Tian went to prison, would he be able to come out alive? "Teacher, you." Duanmu Lu had a confused look on his face. "It's okay. Have confidence in me." Nie Tian smiled faintly and then said to Gu Wuyo, "My precious disciple doesn't need to go to prison. I can go alone. Anyway, General Gu, you also like him. Why don't you take him in while I'm not here?" Gu Wuyo frowned even more. He looked at Nie Tian with a very strange look and thought to himself, why isn't this guy afraid at all? He still has the mood to joke at this time. Duanmu Lu probably didn't understand what Nie Tian meant this time, so his expression didn't change much. Gu Wuyo stared at Nie Tian for a long time, and finally made sure that the latter was serious. Then he said, "Come with me." "Okay." Nie Tian agreed happily. His face was actually full of excitement and joy. It didn't look like he was going to prison, but was clearly going to the bridal chamber. Under everyone's shocked gazes, Nie Tian and the other two disappeared. After a while, Gu Huio took Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu to a secluded alley. "General Gu, aren't we going to prison?" Nie Tian saw Gu Huio stop and frowned. "You can go now," Gu Huio said, cold with his back to Nie Tian, as if he didn't hear Nie Tian. Although Nie Tian and Duanmu Lu had killed Lu Jinyuan, Gu Huio didn't plan to arrest them. "General Gu, I'm a murderer. Why are you willing to let me go?" Nie Tian was a little surprised and asked again. "Are you leaving or not?" Gu Huio said coldly. Apparently, he was a little angry. "Of course not," Nie Tian said without hesitation. The crown prince behind Lu Jinyuan hadn't come out yet. If Nie Tian left now, it would be ridiculous. "Are you really going to prison?" Gu Huio suddenly turned around and stared at Nie Tian with his sharp eyes. There was confusion, surprise, and anger in his eyes. "Of course." Nie Tian's expression didn't change as he said with a plain tone, "I have to go to Heaven Prison. Do you know what kind of place it is?" Gu Huio's eyes sparkled. "I've been the commander of the Imperial Guards for so many years, and no one has ever come out of prison alive." Nie Tian was slightly surprised, and then he said with joy, "Then I have to go and have a look." "You!" Gu Huio saw Nie Tian's reaction, and he wanted to curse. "General Gu, don't worry." Nie Tian smiled. "I care more about my life than you do. Since I dared to go to prison, I have the confidence to come out." Gu Huio stared at Nie Tian's eyes for a long time, and he couldn't help but feel shocked. After a while, Gu Huio finally chose to compromise. He said with a hint of helplessness, "Since you want to die, I can only fulfill your wish." The three left the quiet alley, and this time, they really went to the Imperial prison. Half an hour later, the three appeared at the gate of the Imperial prison. Gu Huio put shackles on Nie Tian. The shackles weighed thousands of kilograms, and Nie Tian sensed that there was a third-rank spiritual formation inside. Chapter 395. Gu Huio froze when he saw Nie Tian's rare, serious expression. "General Gu, I want to see the Emperor of Great Chu before I die. Can you do that for me?" Nie Tian asked in a deep voice, his face somewhat grim. "See the Emperor?" Gu Huio's voice changed and a hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. "Yes." Nie Tian had expected Gu Huio's reaction, but he still nodded seriously. What was the most difficult person to see in this world? It wasn't the sect masters of the major sects or the patriarchs of the aristocratic families, but the emperors of the various empires. Empires were different from sects and aristocratic families. In sects and aristocratic families, the strongest person was usually the sect master, and the patriarch. But in empires, the emperor wasn't usually the strongest person in the country. This created a common problem among emperors: fear of death. Because they weren't strong, the emperors were afraid of death and rarely met them. When Yeyuro was kidnapped, Nie Tian had to ask the crown prince to meet the Emperor of Blue Cloud. Otherwise, he would have to barge into the palace. The Emperor of Blue Cloud was only the emperor of a third-rate empire, but the Emperor of Great Chu was the emperor of a first-rate empire. It was even more difficult to meet him. Moreover, Nie Tian was a stranger from the Northern Sea region, and he was a sinner. It was almost impossible to meet the emperor. When Nie Tian said he wanted to see the emperor, Gu Huio's eyes were filled with killing intent. He even suspected that Nie Tian was an assassin, saving someone for no reason, entering the imperial prison shamelessly, and now he wanted to see the emperor. Nie Tian's actions were strange no matter how he thought about it. "General Gu, don't misunderstand. I'm definitely not an assassin. I just want to talk to your emperor about the crown prince." Nie Tian could naturally tell what Gu Huio was thinking. Talk to the crown prince? Gu Wuyo's eyes were filled with mockery. His expression was clearly saying, "Who do you think you are? The sect master of Battle Cloud sect? Do you want to interfere in the affairs of Great Chu? I can't do it." Gu Wuyo didn't hesitate and refused cold. She was not heartless, and she really could not do it. To suddenly bring a prisoner on death row from the celestial prison to see the emperor, this action almost made people think of it as a rebellion. Nie Tian knew that Gu Wuyo really didn't have the ability, so he could only look at Duanmu. He curled his lips and said, "Duanmu, since General Gu can't help, you have to think of a way to meet the emperor. My life is in your hands. Whether or not I can see the emperor depends on you." "Teacher, There was actually a trace of sorrow in Duanmulu's expression, and then he nodded heavily and said, "Don't worry, teacher. Even if I have to risk my life, I'll surely let the emperor of the Darchu dynasty see you." Gu Wuyo frowned slightly and looked at Duanmu speechlessly. He said in his heart, "Can't you see that your weird teacher is teasing you?" To be honest, Nie Tian couldn't be considered to be teasing Duanmu. Although he entered the celestial prison and wasn't in any danger, the matter of meeting the emperor of the Darchu dynasty really fell on Duanmulu's shoulders. This fellow Duanmulu was too straightforward. Leaving this matter to him was also a form of training. "Okay. Teacher's life is in your hands. You must let me see the emperor of the Darchu dynasty." Nie Tian nodded heavily and his expression was tense. After he finished speaking, he turned and walked towards the celestial prison. Looking at Nie Tian's back, Duanmulu's eyes were already filled with hot tears. He said solemnly, "Teacher, don't worry. I definitely won't let you down." Seeing Duanmulu's sorrowful expression, Gu Wuyo was speechless. This pair of teacher and disciple is simply the weirdest of weirdos. The teacher is as slippery as a loach, and the disciple is as straightforward as an old bull. Nie Tian's figure quickly disappeared, but Duanmu was still looking at him with a sorrowful expression. "Let's go." Gu Wuyo looked at Duanmu and couldn't help but shake his head and frown. He directly turned Duanmulu's head around and said rudely, "Go." Duanmu finally reacted and asked blankly, "Where are we going?" "Think of a way for your weird teacher. Beg Master to pray to Bodhisattva and see how we can let him see the emperor before he dies," Gu Wuyo said with a sigh. His tone was extremely helpless. Although she refused verbally, Gu Wuyo would still help Nie Tian. Just now, when she saw Nie Tian's gaze, that kind of strong confidence, it made her, a soldier who came from the battlefield, shiver. Therefore, she concluded that Nie Tian definitely couldn't be an assassin. Furthermore, this Duanmu in front of her was also a weirdly honest person. If she relied on him to think of a way for Nie Tian, he would most likely barge into the palace. Great Chu was a first-rate empire, and the security of the palace was unimaginably tight. There were tens of thousands of imperial guards and countless imperial secret guard. If Duanmu were to barge in, it was guaranteed that not even a speck of his corpse would be left. Gu Wuyo didn't know why, but she had a strange feeling about Duanmu. She had an impulse to help him. "Thank you, miss," Duanmu said gratefully. "I'm Duanmu. I haven't asked for your name yet." Gu Wuyo replied coldly. She thought to herself, "You're really wooden. You live up to your family name." Carefree. What a good name. I'm guessing that your younger sister must be called Gu Wuyo. It was very rare for Duanmu to actually make a corny joke. Gu Wuyo was speechless. She couldn't be bothered to respond to him. On the other side, Nie Tian was led by two jailers into the Great Chu heavenly prison that he had been dreaming of. This was a dark and serene passage. On both sides there were cells that looked like iron cages. The prisoners in the cells on both sides ran out and stretched their hands out of the cages. All of them seemed to be extremely excited. "Look, there's new meat again. And it's a handsome young man. Yeah, look at his small appearance. He's very handsome. His skin is also fresh and tender. I wonder who is lucky enough to be in the same cage as him. I'm so jealous. Someone will be able to enjoy himself at night. The two jailers heard the prisoner's shouts and laughed. Then, they glanced at Nye Tian from time to time, as if they wanted to see the latter wet his pants in fear. Unfortunately, Nye Tian was as calm as a pool of stagnant water. He didn't react at all and completely ignored the shouts around him. Actually, Nye Tian had some reaction in his heart. He thought to himself, these prisoners have good taste. They can actually see that I'm handsome. Soon, after passing through many iron doors, Nye Tian was brought to a place without any light. Then, the two jailers laughed. Then, one of them went to pull a short and heavy iron door. Clatter, clatter. With the sound of iron chains being pulled, the iron door was opened. Dazzling light shone in. Then, a tsunami of shouts came in like an excited crowd. One of the jailers behind Nye Tian gave him a hard shove. You dog! How dare you kill the crown prince's brother-in-law? You must be tired of living. Go to hell. Cold, sinister laughter echoed out. Chapter 396. Nye Tian couldn't help but be stunned when he sensed the bloody aura. He immediately focused his eyes and saw 4 blood-red beasts standing in front of him. The 4 beasts' bodies were like iron towers. When they stood up, they were 20 meters tall. Their bodies were dark red and emitted a bloody aura. They looked similar to the violent ape, but they were even wilder than the violent ape. Nye Tian calmed himself down and enlarged his field of vision. Only then did he realize that he was standing at the edge of an underground fighting ring. The spectators in the stands around him were shouting at the top of their lungs, their cheers echoing like a tsunami. Stinking brat, now that you've entered the blood-death arena, just wait for the demonic sanguine apes to tear you apart. The voices of 2 jailers resounded from the small door behind him. When Nye Tian heard them mentioning the crown prince, he immediately understood what was going on. It seemed that the crown prince had already received news of Lu Zhenyuan's death. He had already arranged everything in the imperial prison and was just waiting for Nye Tian's arrival. Nye Tian never expected that there would be a blood-death arena in the imperial prison of the Great Chu Empire. What was even more bizarre was that there were so many spectators in the blood-death arena. Roar! At this moment, the 4 demonic sanguine apes let out violent roars. Bulging veins could be seen on their tower-like bodies, making them look even more bloodthirsty and violent. Hiss! Nye Tian sucked in a breath of cold air and guessed, these demonic sanguine apes are definitely rank 4 spirit beasts. Judging from their aura, they're much more ferocious than ordinary rank 4 spirit beasts. Their true combat strength is definitely comparable to a high-level giant soul realm martial artist. Tear him apart! Tear him apart! Tear him apart! The spectators on the spectators' stand let out sinister laughter. The moment Nye Tian was torn into meat paste by the demonic sanguine apes was the moment of their greatest excitement. Shit! Nye Tian cursed in his heart. Originally, with his strength, dealing with 4 demonic blood apes wouldn't be a problem. However, he was currently wearing shackles, and there were Tier 3 restriction spiritual arrays on the shackles. At this moment, Nye Tian still had 2 third-ranked astral souls. However, due to the suppression of the 3rd-ranked spiritual array, it was difficult for him to even revolve his Yuan Qi. It was impossible for him to use the power of his astral souls. Roar! Bang! 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 The demonic blood ape let out a loud roar. It was filled with killing intent. Then, it strode forward madly, causing the ground of the bloody death ground to tremble slightly. F***CK. Nye Tian furiously cursed and forcefully circulated his origin energy. His feet executed the swan steps, dashing left and swaying right, his figure nimble. Boom! A demonic sanguine ape swung its huge palm over, and the baleful aura that was coming towards Lin Yun actually formed a few streaks of blood red in the air, causing the air to tighten. Nye Tian fiercely stomped his feet and his body moved several meters to the side. However, he was still hit by the murderous aura. On his arm, several frightening wounds immediately appeared, and blood gushed out. *T. Nye couldn't help but feel nervous. The demonic blood apes were bloodthirsty and violent. Now that they smelled blood, they would definitely become even more violent. Bang! 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 As expected, the 4 demonic blood apes smelled the fresh blood in the air and immediately punched out with their huge fists, creating huge craters on the ground. The 4 demonic blood apes rushed over like 4 small mountains, and the violent aura they emitted made it hard for Nye to breathe. Master, Little White and I will hold them back. Hurry up and release the shackles. At this time, the corpse demon lord's voice came from the Chaos Origin coffin. Following that, 2 small figures appeared. They were the corpse demon lord and the snow fox Mirage. Little White was the name that the corpse demon lord had given to the snow fox Mirage. Because Nye Yuan Qi was being suppressed, the 9th extreme chaos beast couldn't unleash its power. He could only rely on the corpse demon lord and the snow fox Mirage. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 figures flew towards the 4 demonic blood apes at lightning speed. The corpse demon lord and the snow fox Mirage were only the size of a fist. In front of the 20-meter demonic blood apes, they were like flies and mosquitoes. Pfft! The snow fox Mirage was extremely fast. Its small body crashed into the face of one of the demonic blood apes, leaving a bloody scar. The corpse demon lord also crashed into the chest of another demonic blood ape and started to chew on it. 2 of the demonic blood apes were enraged. They swung their huge fists randomly, causing the other 2 demonic blood apes to go crazy as well. The 4 demonic blood apes swung their claws randomly in the air, but the corpse demon lord and the snow fox Mirage were too fast. They couldn't catch them at all. This sudden scene caused the whistling sounds in the surroundings to weaken significantly. The crowd looked at the 4 demonic blood apes in a daze. They didn't know what was going on. Nye finally had a chance to catch his breath. He immediately sat down cross-legged and forcefully circulated the Yuan Qi in his body. He tried to find the core of the restriction spiritual array within the shackles. Then, he started to bombard the core with waves of Yuan Qi. When the crowd saw Nye suddenly sit down, there was a momentary silence in the blood death arena. No one knew what was going on. The 4 demonic blood apes seemed to have lost their minds. They actually started to dance on the spot. Wong! At this moment, a huge bell suddenly rang in the blood death arena. Then, there was a series of rattling noises. In midair, 2 huge iron cages appeared. The crowd saw that there were 2 more demonic blood apes in the iron cages. They were even bigger than the 4 demonic blood apes in the blood death arena. Tear him apart! Tear him apart! Immediately after, the crowd became even more excited, and the sound of cheering could be heard again. On a high platform in the spectator stands, a gorgeous figure was gazing at Nye from afar with a pair of cold, gloomy eyes. The face belonged to a man in his mid-20s. He was handsome, but his eyes were extremely gloomy. Beside him, a middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache smiled and said, "Your Highness, don't worry. The demonic blood ape king's strength is comparable to a warrior at the peak of the giant spirit realm. No matter how powerful that kid is, there is no way he can walk out of the blood death arena alive." This young man was none other than the crown prince of the great Chu Empire, Wang Haorui. Wang Haorui's malicious eyes stared at Nye. His voice was extremely cold. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "How dare you kill the people around me? You're courting death." Yes. I don't know where this stinky kid came from. He actually dared to kill young Master Lu. He really doesn't know what's good for him. The Blood Death Arena's Deacon Wang Jintao said with a smile. The dignified crown prince wouldn't come to a place like the Blood Death Arena easily. He had to seize the opportunity and serve him well. Since Nye was someone the crown prince wanted to kill, Wang Jintao naturally couldn't let him live. The Blood Death Arena. As long as you entered the Blood Death Arena, Don't think about walking out alive. Boom. Boom. At this moment, the two huge iron cages shook and opened. Bang. Bang. The two demonic blood ape kings, which were over 30 meters tall, smashed down like two mountains. The entire blood death arena shook. In an instant, endless killing intent spread out. Chapter 397. Nyetian broke free from the shackles and stood up abruptly. However, he didn't look at the demonic blood ape king. Instead, he raised his head and locked his gaze on Wang Haorui. Wang Haorui suddenly felt a chill down his spine when he noticed that Nyetian was looking at him. He even had goosebumps. However, he wasn't weak as he was already in the 9th level of the giant spiritual realm. He calmed down and looked at Nyetian as he muttered, "Stinking brat, who are you?" Nyetian's gaze made Wang Haorui feel fear. Furthermore, he didn't know how Nyetian could sense his existence. Nyetian didn't show any fear in the deathly blood arena. He stared at Wang Haorui and said, "You must be the crown prince behind Lu Jinyuan, right? I can only say that you're unlucky to have met me." Nyetian wanted to enter the heavenly prison because he was waiting for this crown prince to appear. He guessed that if he was sent to the heavenly prison, this crown prince would definitely come and visit him. As expected, Wang Haorui didn't disappoint Nyetian and came early. Seeing that Nyetian seemed to be saying something, Wang Haorui knitted his brows and the killing intent in his heart became even more resolute. "Stinking brat, this crown prince will definitely not allow you to live. Your Highness, are you all right?" Wang Jintao was nervous when he sensed the killing intent coming from Wang Haorui. Wang Haorui ignored him and sat down. He wanted to personally witness the scene of Nyetian being torn apart by the demonic blood ape king. Only then would he be able to dispel the hatred in his heart. The appearance of the two demonic blood ape kings in the deathly blood arena caused the baleful aura to become even denser. The corpse demon lord and snow mirage fox's speed was affected, and they were almost caught by the demonic blood ape kings. "Whitey, Master has broken free from the shackles. Let's go." When the corpse demon lord saw that Nyetian had stood up, he screamed and charged towards Nyetian. The snow mirage fox was actually able to understand the corpse demon lord's words. Her body was like a bolt of lightning as she charged into Nyetian's body. Very good. When Nyetian saw that both the cadaver demon lord and the snow phantom fox were fine, he smiled faintly. His lips curled into a strange arc as the heaven-severing slash appeared in his hand. He roared furiously, "Red bastards, let me cut open your stomachs today!" Roar. The 2 and 4 blood demon ape kings seemed to understand Nyetian's words. They roared in anger, and waves of murderous aura gushed out like invisible ripples. Nyetian felt a slight discomfort in his chest and couldn't help but say, "The blood demon ape king is indeed powerful. If I were an ordinary giant martial artist, I reckon I would have difficulty breathing." Nyetian's current strength was at giant spirit level 3, and he had awakened the power of 2,560,000 stars in his body. Unless his opponent was a true energy boundary cultivator, he would be able to suppress his opponent without even using his astral souls. Nyetian estimated that the blood demon ape's strength was equivalent to a giant spirit level 5 cultivator, and the blood demon ape king's strength was equivalent to a giant spirit level 9 cultivator. 4 blood demon apes and 2 blood demon ape kings. Even a true energy boundary cultivator would find it troublesome. However, in Nyetian's opinion, it was only enough for him to practice. Swish! As Nyetian thrust out his sword, a piercing sword chi pierced through the air towards one of the blood demon apes at an inconceivable speed, and struck it. Boom! The blood demon ape was struck by the sword chi, and a bloody hole appeared on its arm. Roar! The blood demon ape let out a painful howl and charged towards Nyetian without caring about anything else. The other blood demon apes also charged over and surrounded Nyetian before charging out in a frenzy. Good timing! Nyetianling's expression turned cold. He took a step forward and his figure flew up. Countless sword chi flew out like arrows, and the murderous sword chi surged in all directions. The 6 blood demon apes were hit by the sword chi, and their bodies were blocked. Countless sword wounds appeared on their bodies as blood gushed out. The scene was extremely tragic. Seeing this scene, the cheering crowd fell into a deathly silence. Wang Jintao, what's going on? Is this all your blood demon ape kings have? Wang Haorui stood up with a gloomy expression as he angrily berated. Your Highness, please calm down. Wang Jintao was also drenched in cold sweat. A giant spirit level 3 youth was actually able to block the attacks of 4 blood demon apes and 2 blood demon ape kings at the same time. This was simply too unbelievable. Your Highness, the blood demon ape kings are a little abnormal. Please don't be anxious. This little one believes that they will be able to tear that brat apart. Wang Jintao explained, but even he himself didn't believe it. In the bloody deathfield, War God Imperial Fist. Nie Tian was dozens of meters in the air. All the energy in his body surged as he threw a punch at one of the blood demon ape. Boom! The huge fist was like a mountain and an ocean. It sent one of the blood demon apes flying. Its huge body fell down and it could no longer get up. Nie Tian had the power of 2,560,000 stars in his body. Even if he didn't use any martial skills, he could still wield the power of one dragon. Combined with the power of the war god Imperial Fist, he was even more domineering. Seeing one of their companions being knocked down with a single punch, the other blood demon apes were stunned for a moment. There was a momentary sluggishness in their ruthless eyes. Nie Tian took the opportunity and threw out another 3 punches. Boom! 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 With 3 muffled sounds, the other 3 blood demon apes fell to the ground, unable to get up. How is this possible? Wang Jintao, who was watching the battle from the high platform, was drenched in cold sweat. He couldn't believe his eyes. Nie Tian was clearly in the 3rd sky giant spiritual realm, but he actually knocked down a blood demon ape with a single punch. It was simply unimaginable. Wang Haorui looked at Nie Tian. The coldness on his face was even more obvious. The stronger Nie Tian was, the greater his desire to kill him would be. If he couldn't see Nie Tian die today, Wang Haorui would definitely feel a thorn in his back. He wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. With the 4 blood demon apes dead, the 2 blood demon ape kings were left. The 2 blood demon ape kings charged over. The death of their companions made them even more berserk. The dense aura of blood surged out like torrential waves. Nie Tian did not knit his brows. He circulated his yuan meridians and the sword aura on his sword surged. With a slash, 100-meter-long sword ray flew out. Pung! A blood demon ape king's head was directly smashed into pieces by the sword ray. Blood splattered everywhere. When the other blood demon ape king saw this scene, its violent eyes actually revealed a look of fear. However, before it could react, another huge sword shadow slashed down. Its 30-meter-long giant body was actually cut in 2. Blood spurted out like a fountain and shot into the air. When the crowd saw this bloody scene, the thunderous cheers came to a stop. Countless gazes looked at the figure in the deathly bloody arena. It was as if they were looking at a bloodthirsty demon god. An indescribable fear surged in their hearts. Nie Tian didn't care about these people. His figure flickered as he flashed past the corpse of the blood demon ape. When he stopped, there were 6 blood-red cores floating in his palm. 4 of them were slightly smaller, while the other 2 were slightly larger. The 6 cores were the spiritual cores of the blood demon ape. There was even blood dripping from them. Chapter 398. Wang Haorui sensed that Nie Tian was looking at him, and his face became even more gloomy and bloodthirsty. Wang Jintao, is this the power of the demonic blood ape king? Wang Haorui roared angrily, the muscles on his face twitching uncontrollably. Your Highness! Wang Jintao shuddered and knelt down, trembling as he said, this brat's strength is too strange. The sanguine demon Ape King's battle prowess is comparable to a 9th-level giant spirit martial artist, but it couldn't even block a single sword strike from this kid. This is really beyond this little one's expectations. Wang Haorui's eyes darkened as he asked, "What other fierce beasts are there today? Put them all into the blood-death ground." This crown prince doesn't believe that a mere 3rd-level giant spirit realm martial artist can really defy the heavens. Wang Jintao gulped and said with a troubled expression, "Your Highness, the demonic Blood Ape King is already the strongest beast in the blood-death ground." The muscles on Wang Haorui's face twitched. "Your Highness." Wang Jintao's face turned pale with fright, and he quickly said, "In a few days, the vicious beast arena will send a 3-toed violent bear. The 3-toed violent bear is a 5th-order spirit beast, and its strength is comparable to a true element boundary cultivator. It will definitely be able to tear this little brat apart." A few days later? This crown prince can't wait a single day. Today this brat must die. Wang Haorui's eyes were cold. He suddenly turned to Wang Jintao and coldly said, "If he doesn't die today, then you will." Wang Jintao swallowed his saliva, and the cold sweat on his face flowed down to his neck. "Your Highness." Suddenly, Wang Jintao seemed to think of something, and fear flashed in his eyes. He lowered his voice and said, "Why don't we lock this kid up with the human demon?" "Human devil? Is that the legendary man-eating guy?" Wang Haorui obviously knew who the human demon Wang Jintao was talking about was. At first, he was stunned, but then he smiled coldly and said in a heavy tone, "Let's do it." Human demon. This was a monster in the celestial prison. He was locked in the lowest level of the heavenly prison, living in darkness every day. Every prisoner who was locked up with a human demon only had one fate: to be eaten by a human demon. Wang Jintao looked at Nie Tian and laughed coldly in his heart. "Stinking brat, you caused me to lose a good opportunity to curry favor with the crown prince. I will feed you to the demons." Nie Tian looked at Wang Haorui and Wang Jintao from afar, not knowing what they were talking about. However, he couldn't make a move yet. After all, this was the imperial prison. Who knew how many experts were hiding here? These experts were the final trump cards of the Darchu imperial clan, and they would surely not come out at ordinary times. Moreover, they only obeyed the orders of the emperor, and even the crown prince, Wang Haorui, was unable to mobilize them. Boom! A moment later, the iron door behind Nie Tian opened. The two jailers saw that Nie Tian was alive and well, with only a few minor injuries. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. "Follow us!" The two jailers shouted, but they didn't dare to approach Nie Tian. Nie Tian didn't say anything. He left the blood-death arena and entered the iron gate. Following behind the two jailers, Nie Tian quickly arrived at the other end of the prison. Swoosh! Within the dark passageway of the prison, the two jailers worked together to pull open an iron door on the ground, and a hidden entrance to the dungeon appeared. Nie Tian frowned slightly. A foul smell surged out from the dungeon, and it seemed as if it was a rotting slaughterhouse below. "Go down!" The two jailers moved aside and allowed Nie Tian to enter the dungeon. Nie Tian thought for a moment, and he sensed that there was actually an extremely formidable aura at the bottom of the dungeon. This aura seemed to have been restrained, but Nie Tian's perception was formidable, and he was still able to sense how terrifying it was. This aura within the dungeon is actually even stronger than that member of the Heaven Burial Association that killed Elderly, yet it seems to be suppressed by some sort of force. Who exactly is this person? Nie Tian started to ponder in his heart, and at the same time, he was weighing if he should enter the dungeon. He knew that there were surely experts of the Great Chu Empire standing guard within the dungeon. If he caused a ruckus in the dungeon, then it would surely draw the experts to make a move. At that time, it would be very bad. And that aura at the bottom of the dungeon made Nie Tian very interested. The person who killed Elderly was called Wei Yangzi, and Nie Tian had once heard Long Sky call out his name. Wei Yangzi's strength was much greater than Duanmu Bai's, and the latter was a peak figure in the South Mountain region. The person in the dungeon seemed to be even more terrifying than Wei Yangzi. With such strength, even in the Shumi spirit capital, he would certainly be a prominent figure. How could such a figure appear in the heavenly prison of the great Chu Empire? Thinking of this, Nie Tian's curiosity grew even stronger, and he no longer hesitated, stepping into the dungeon. As Nie Tian walked down, the two jailers directly closed the dungeon door. One of the jailers chuckled and said, "This stinking brat definitely doesn't know the power of the human demon. Tomorrow we'll wait to collect his corpse." Collect his corpse? The other jailer laughed instead and said, "The human demon will definitely eat him until there's nothing left of him. How could he leave his corpse?" "That's true." The two looked at each other and smiled, then hurriedly left. Nie Tian walked in the dungeon. There wasn't a bit of light in the surroundings, but fortunately, his perception was strong. Even in a situation where his eyes couldn't see, he could still clearly feel the steps under his feet. After walking about 100 steps, Nie Tian finally arrived at the bottom of the dungeon. This dungeon is a bit deep. It's actually built tens of meters underground. Nie Tian murmured. Just as he lifted his foot, he discovered that there seemed to be a sticky liquid under his feet, causing him to involuntarily frown. Finally, there's food. Ha! Just at this time, an insolent and ruthless laughter suddenly rang out in the dungeon. Soon after, a fishy smell assaulted his nostrils, and it was abnormally pungent. Nie Tian felt a powerful aura wandering in the surroundings. With his divine sense, he actually couldn't capture the specific location of that aura. Puff, puff, puff. The origin energy in his body surged, and 3 flames ignited on Nie Tian's palm. With a light wave, they expanded into 3 fireballs floating in midair. Suddenly, the dungeon became brighter, and he could clearly see the huge stone pillars. Nie Tian looked at the ground and was shocked to discover that there was a dark red sticky liquid under his feet, emitting a rotten and bloody smell, as if there were corpses rotting in the water. When he looked forward, his face couldn't help but change. In front of him, there were actually countless skeletons with rotten flesh hanging on them. Looking at the shape, they were actually human skeletons. What is this place? Why are there so many corpses? Nie Tian became cold, and his divine sense spread out, trying to capture that tyrannical aura. "Kid, you're actually not afraid?" At this time, a strong wind blew against his face. Nie Tian subconsciously took a step back. Focusing his eyes, a strange face appeared, and it was actually facing him, less than half a meter away. Huh! Nie Tian saw that the face's eyes were actually under the nose, and couldn't help but be stunned. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. Only then did he see clearly that it was actually a human face hanging upside down. Hee. The next moment, the face moved and opened its mouth to speak. "Little guy, you're actually an alchemist. Your meat must be very delicious." Chapter 399. Hearing the man's words, Nie Tian did not show any signs of fear, and only frowned slightly. He calmed himself down and carefully looked at the upside-down face in front of him. Unkempt hair and a face full of beard. Although it was very dirty and emitted a strong stench, that pair of eyes was unusually spirited. Even in this filthy and smelly dungeon, there was still a sense of dignity in his eyes that could not be violated. Pretending to be mysterious can only fool ordinary people. Nie Tian's eyes were calm and cold. The man in front of him was simply a human, and he was actually a demon pretending to be a human. What a joke! That face suddenly changed, 2 eyebrows squeezed together and turned upside down, revealing his body. He seemed to be quite surprised and said, "Little kid, you're really not afraid of me? You're not a demon or a ghost, but a human like me. I have no enmity with you, so why should I be afraid of you?" Nie Tian looked at the man in front of him and said calmly. At this moment, he finally saw the man's full face. This was an old man. Although his beard was thick, the contours of his face could still be seen and he looked very resolute. His hands were actually holding onto two heavy chains. Upon closer inspection, the two chains were not wrapped around his body. Instead, they were pierced through his shoulder blades. Just by looking at them, one could imagine the unbearable pain he was in. But his face was calm and there was no sign of pain, as if he was used to this kind of pain. When Nye Tian looked at the man, the latter was also looking at him. His face revealed a slight surprise, but he immediately laughed. "Young man, you're indeed very unusual. You're only a teenager, but you're already in the third stage of the giant spirit realm, and you're even a sword-heart swordsman. With such talent, even in the insufferably arrogant Su-Mi spirit capital, you can be considered a top talent." That person paused for a moment, looked at the 3 fireballs floating in the air and continued, "Moreover, you're a pill master. Looking at your adept control of fire, you should be a 4th-tier pill master without a doubt. A teenage 4th-rank pill master, even that old thing Meng Fanchen wouldn't be able to cultivate such a person. Speak. Who exactly are you?" That person's eyes suddenly turned sharp and his whole body released a surging killing intent. A wave of pressure enveloped Nye Tian. When Nye Tian heard this person's words, his eyes flashed with surprise. Meng Fanchen was the leader of the Alchemist Guild. Even the patriarchs of the 4 great clans would have to respectfully address him as Mr. Meng. Just who was this person? He dared to call Meng Fanchen an old geezer without the slightest hint of respect in his eyes. It was as if he didn't take Meng Fanchen seriously at all. Nye Tian suppressed the shock in his heart, completely ignoring the other party's pressure, and said indifferently, "My name is Nye Tian, and I'm not some big shot. I'm just a small city lord in the Nanshan region. On the other hand, Senior, your aura is vigorous and your strength is unfathomable. A person like you should not be a nobody in the 3,000 small world. I'm curious, who are you?" Even though the person before him was in the dungeon, his aura was extremely dense, making it impossible for him to sense it. Every time Nye Tian's divine sense probed over, it was like a clay ox entering the sea, vanishing without a trace. Hence, he estimated that this person's strength was at least above the 5th tier of the Divine Wheel Realm. The 5th tier of the Divine Wheel Realm. Even the inner elders of the 4 great clans might not have such strength. How could such a person be trapped in the dungeon of the Great Chu Empire? That person stared at Nye Tian. When he saw that Nye Tian didn't panic at all and even asked him a question in return, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. "Nye Tian, I consider myself the most arrogant person in the 3,000 small worlds. I didn't expect you to be even more arrogant than me. Even in a place like this, you are actually not afraid of someone who is far stronger than you. I admire your courage." Seeing that although this person was a little crazy, he didn't seem like an unforgivable devil, Nye Tian became even calmer. He looked at the corpses around him and asked, "Did you kill these people on the ground?" That person glanced at Nye Tian and wasn't angry. He said, "Some of them were scared to death, some of them committed suicide, and some of them were killed by me." Humph. That person laughed strangely and said arrogantly, "It's ridiculous that those ignorant people said I was a man-eating devil. How stupid! If I was really a devil, would there still be people alive in the entire Great Chu Empire?" Nye Tian was silent in his heart. With this person's strength, if he really wanted to start a massacre, not only the Great Chu Empire, but even the entire North Sea would be turned into a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. "Senior, who are you?" Nye Tian asked again. That person laughed crazily. There seemed to be some sorrow in his expression. He said loudly, "It doesn't matter who I was. I don't want to talk about the past anymore." Nye Tian nodded slightly. He couldn't force the person to tell him if he didn't want to. After all, everyone had their own secret. "Nye Tian, you just said that you are from the Nanshan region. Why did you come to the Great Chu Empire? and even to the heavenly prison? That person suddenly thought of something and asked with interest. Nie Tian didn't hide anything, and briefly told him what had happened. That person laughed crazily after hearing that and said, Nie Tian, you are really arrogant at such a young age. You actually came all the way to the North Sea to gain experience in Chaos City. You are courageous and insightful. The younger generation will surpass us in time. You killed a relative of the emperor and offended the crown prince. There must be someone who wants you dead, so they threw you together with I to borrow I's hand to kill you. These aristocratic families are all treacherous people. None of them are good. Speaking of this, that person seemed angry. He waved his hand and said, But don't worry. I won't kill you, and I will help you leave this place. Senior, I don't want to leave yet, Nie Tian said with a faint smile. You don't want to leave? That person was taken aback and immediately smiled and said, That's good. I hasn't talked to anyone for a long time. With you here, I won't be too lonely. Nie Tian nodded and asked, What's your name, Senior? I's surname is Yi. You can call me Elder Yi. That person was very heroic and said loudly, Nie Tian, you are courageous and insightful, and have monstrous talent. In the future, you will definitely become a great person. It's best if you can beat all those birdmen in Sumi Ling City. Elder Yi flatters me. Nie Tian smiled faintly and immediately said, Elder Yi seems to be very prejudiced against the people of Sumi Ling City. Did they offend you? Of course. That year, when I stepped into Sumi Ling City, he challenged the geniuses of Sumi Ling City. Who knew that? Elder Yi suddenly stopped halfway. He chuckled and waved his hand and said, Let's not talk about the past. Since Elder Yi doesn't want to talk about it, it's not convenient for me to ask. Nie Tian frowned slightly and immediately looked at the 2 iron chains behind Elder Yi. Nie Tian looked carefully. On the 2 iron chains, there were actually light golden runes engraved densely, emitting a faint incantation aura. A layer of faint incantation power flowed on the iron chains, and was actually constantly absorbing the power in Elder Ye's body. The more Nie Tian looked at the incantation on the iron chains, the more familiar it was. He frowned and thought, but couldn't remember for a moment. Chapter 400. Devil Sealing Curse. Nie Tian exclaimed in his heart. His expression changed and he was very excited. Yes, it's the Devil Sealing Curse. Devil Sealing Curse was a kind of evil curse of the fiend race. Those who were afflicted with the curse would no longer have their strength increase. At the same time, their spirit energy would be constantly devoured by the curse. As time passed, their strength would continuously decline. Not only had Nie Tian seen this kind of curse before, he had even experienced it personally. Back then, Fiend Emperor Qi Wu Xiaotian had once released it on his body. Unfortunately, it did not succeed. Nie Tian used a day's time to remove the Devil Sealing Curse. Although it was just a day's time, Nie Tian's strength was significantly affected. He spent a full half a month before completely eliminating the continuous damage caused by the Devil Sealing Curse. At this time, the iron chain on Elder Ye's body was very similar to the curse that Qi Wu Xiaotian released back then. It was just that it was far less terrifying than Qi Wu Xiaotian's curse. It seemed to be a kind of weakened Devil Sealing Curse. It could only be considered a minor Devil Sealing Curse. But even if it was a minor Devil Sealing Curse, that kind of pain was absolutely unimaginable to ordinary people. The Devil Sealing Curse iron chain pierced through Elder Ye's shoulder blade. It absolutely had a suppressive effect on his strength. It would even cause his strength to continuously decline. Nie Tian did not know how long the iron chain on Elder Ye's body had existed for, but this kind of pain, he could withstand it. His willpower was simply unimaginable. Nie Tian, what's wrong? Elder Yi saw Nie Tian's expression change again and again. He could not help laughing and asked. Nie Tian suppressed the shock in his heart and asked directly, Elder Yi, How did the iron chain on your back come about? Elder Yi chuckled and did not want to explain. But he saw that Nye Tian's expression was serious and seemed to know something. Elder Ye's expression slowly changed. He seemed to recall something and said solemnly, "The iron chain on my back is called Death God Iron Chain. This is a big gift that my good brother gave me 40 years ago." Nye Tian looked at Elder Ye's gloomy and angry expression. He naturally understood that his last good brother was definitely a great enemy. 40 years. Elder Yi had actually lived with the Grim Reaper's chain for 40 years. My God, what pain he must endure in the meantime! No wonder he didn't have any reaction when the Grim Reaper's chain pierced through his shoulder blade. After a while, Nye Tian slowly calmed down and said, "Elder Yi, why didn't you ask for the Death God medal? Take it off?" Elder Yi forced a smile and said, "Of course I want to take it off. This Death God Iron Chain not only suppresses the increase of my strength, but it also continuously devours my origin energy. Over the past 40 years, my strength has dropped from the 6th tier of the Divine Wheel to the 2nd tier of the Divine Wheel. There's not a day that goes by that I don't want to claim Thanatos. However, the runes within the chains firmly shackled my elemental meridians. If I were to forcefully remove the chains, my elemental meridians would also be destroyed. Even if he could survive, he would become a cripple. Isn't this exactly what my good brother wants?" At this point, Elder Yi clenched his fists tightly. Waves of origin energy were released, and it was cold and murderous. If the Death God Iron Chain remained on his back, Elder Yi could still live and preserve his strength. If the chains were taken off, he would become a cripple that was worse than an ordinary person. He could endure the pain, but if his elemental meridians were destroyed, then he would have no hope of taking revenge in this lifetime. That was what he truly couldn't accept. As expected, Nye Tian calmed down. He suddenly looked at Elder Yi and said solemnly, "Elder Yi, I have a way to help you remove the Death God Iron Chain. At the same time, your elemental meridians won't be damaged. Little friend Nye Tian, although you and I have met happily, if you use this moment to make fun of I, don't blame I for falling out with you." Elder Yi looked at Nye Tian cold. Naturally, he didn't believe that Nye Tian could remove the Death God Iron Chain. In order to remove the Death God Iron Chain, Elder Yi had begged countless experts, but unfortunately, no one could help him. Furthermore, the person who left the Death God Iron Chain on him once said that among the 3,000 small worlds, apart from him, no one knew how to remove the Death God Iron Chain. In order to escape from that person's pursuit, Elder Yi hid in the Great Chu Empire's heavenly prison. That person would never have thought that Elder Yi would actually hide in such a place. Nye Tian, however, wasn't afraid at all. He straightened his chest and lightly said, "Elder Yi, do I look like I'm joking?" Elder Yi stared at Nye Tian for a full 10 seconds. When he was sure that the latter wasn't joking, his eyes couldn't help but suddenly widen as he said, "You really know how to remove the Death God Iron Chain?" Nye Tian nodded solemnly. If it wasn't for the fact that the other party was a good person, Nye Tian wouldn't have bothered to talk nonsense with him. "Little friend Nye Tian, is what you said true?" Elder Yi was still doubtful, but the joy in his eyes couldn't be suppressed. There were even sparkling and translucent tears glistening in them. It had been 40 years. He had been tortured alive by the Death God Iron Chain for 40 years. At this time, seeing the hope of removing the Death God Iron Chain, how could Elder Yi not be excited? Nye Tian had been poisoned by the Devil Sealing Curse in his past life. It was just a trifling Devil Sealing Curse, so he naturally knew the method to remove it. The method to break the Devil Sealing Curse lay in two extremes, the cold of ice and the intense of fire. Using an extremely cold object to combine with an extremely hot object could remove the Devil Sealing Curse. In his past life, Nye Tian used the 10,000-year ice soul combined with the 9 heavens-leaf fire to remove the Devil Sealing Curse with the dual effects of ice and fire. This was one of the 3,000 small worlds, so it was impossible to have something like the 10,000-year ice soul. Nye Tian was not at the Heavenly Emperor realm at this time. Even if he cultivated the 9 heavenly fire art, it was impossible for him to extract the true 9 heavenly fire. Hence, it was absolutely impossible to use these two things to remove the devil sealing curse. However, the curse on Elder Ye's body was not the authentic devil sealing curse, but a greatly weakened version. Otherwise, after being afflicted with the devil sealing curse for 40 years, it would be impossible for Elder Yi to even reach the elemental meridian realm, let alone have the strength of a second-tier spirit wheel. Nye Tian thought for a moment and said, "If I want to remove the death god iron chain, I need 2 things." "Speak." Elder Ye's eyes were wide open. "The 1,000-year ice soul and the fire lotus fruit," Nye Tian said with a nod. The curse on Elder Ye's body was the minor devil sealing curse, and the 1,000-year ice soul and the fire lotus fruit were both 6th-tier medicinal herbs. However, these 2 things were not easy to find. Even the top chambers of commerce in the Martial Gathering Merchant Union did not have them. Perhaps only the Sumi Ling City Alchemist Guild had them. "All right. I will go find these 2 things now." Elder Yi was already impatient and didn't want to delay for even a moment. He couldn't wait to get these 2 things immediately. Nye Tian was slightly stunned and said, "Do you know where to find these 2 things?" "Of course I know." Elder Yi laughed and said, "As long as these 2 things exist in the 3,000 small worlds, they will definitely be there." "You're that confident?" Nye Tian was taken aback. Of course. Elder Yi couldn't hide the excitement in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, "Mr. Nye, I will leave the prison now to find the things you want. I will take my leave." This time, even the way Elder Yi addressed Nye Tian changed. Chapter 401. Hee Mr. Nye, just watch. Elder Yi smiled mysteriously and opened his palm. A broken saber appeared in his hand. It looked simple and heavy, and it emitted a strong saber aura. When the broken saber appeared, an invisible force immediately spread out. It was powerful, and it gave people a feeling that it was endless and boundless. This is... Feeling the spread of this force, Nye Tian's expression changed, and he cried out, "Saber force!" Nye Tian's perception was correct. This was the saber force derived from the saber intent. To be able to easily derive such a powerful saber force, Elder Ye's Saber Dao realm was at least at the Saber Spirit. The Saber Dao was the same as the Sword Dao. It was divided into Saber moves, Saber techniques, Saber aura, Saber heart, Saber intent, Saber force, Saber spirit, Saber soul, Saber spirit, Saber intent, Saber intent. Elder Ye's realm was actually at the Saber Spirit. This was something that Nye Tian had never expected. No wonder his aura was so powerful. Even under the suppression of the demon sealing curse, it was still difficult to conceal his majesty and domineering aura. "Mr. Nye, be careful," Elder Yi reminded, and then he shouted in a deep voice, "Break!" Boom! Suddenly, a huge force shot up into the sky and bombarded the sky. F***CK. He's going to break through the dungeon. Nye Tian was quite surprised. He quickly retreated, and then he activated the extreme wood jade sky armor. Boom! In the next moment, the huge force bombarded the top of the dungeon, and a big hole was opened up. If one was outside, one could see a huge layer of the map being lifted up and shot hundreds of meters into the sky. Then, like a mountain, it landed on the bloody death arena. Elder Ye's saber directly opened up a big hole in the dungeon. Light shone in, and it looked like an underground cave. Nye Tian was stunned, and it took him a long time to react. The power of this saber was really shocking. "Mr. Nye, I've caused too much of a commotion. The hidden experts of the Darchu imperial family will arrive soon. Leave with me." Elder Yi looked up and spoke to Nye Tian. Nye Tian frowned. He had to leave even if he didn't want to. With Elder Yi causing such a ruckus, those experts of the Darchu imperial family would surely swarm out. At that time, if they were unable to capture Elder Yi, then they would have to vent their anger on Nie Tian. Alright, let's go. Nie Tian nodded. Elder Yi waved his hand and a strand of saber chi appeared, enveloping Nie Tian like a bubble and slowly rising. That's not bad. It saves me the trouble of using the proud sword Heavenly Wings. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He was happy and relaxed. At this time, more than a dozen black figures appeared above the two of them, all standing in the air. Obviously, they were all true element boundary masters. Who is it? How dare you behave atrociously in my great Chu empire? Madman, get the hell out here for I. You'll pay the price for provoking the dignity of the Darchu imperial family today. A few voices sounded out, and then more than a dozen air-piercing forces blasted down. Nie Tian saw it clearly. Every single one of those forces carried true element boundary chi, and if any one of them hit him, even if he didn't die, he would at least lose a layer of skin. Fortunately, he didn't force his way into the imperial prison. Otherwise, he would surely die without a trace. Haha. Good. I just happen to be bored to death, so I'll use you to exercise my muscles. Elder Yi laughed madly as he casually raised the broken saber in his hand and slashed out. Bang! Instantly, a boundless saber chi rose up and directly broke through the countless attacks above him. A shocking saber image that was hundreds of meters in length soared into the sky and blasted out. Bang! 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 Ah! In the next moment, a muffled sound came from above, followed by countless screams. Nie Tian couldn't help but be surprised. Elder Ye's strength was too strong. With just a casual move, he directly beat more than a dozen high-level true element realm martial artists to the point of dizziness. It was truly terrifying. Mr. Nie, let's go. Elder Yi smiled faintly. He took a step forward and his figure rose from the ground. Nie Tian immediately followed, and the two of them directly rushed out. Elder Yi and Nie Tian's figures froze in midair, and around them were numerous martial artists in black who were holding their chests and vomiting blood. These were all the elite hidden guards of the Darchu imperial family, and all of them were at the true element realm. However, in front of Elder Yi, they could only be little sheep. Who exactly are you? One of the men in black, who wasn't very heavily injured, took a step forward and spoke coldly. You're not worthy to know I's name. Elder Yi laughed madly and said, This dungeon has imprisoned I for dozens of years. Today, it's destroyed and we're even. Mr. Nie, let's go. After speaking, Elder Yi looked at Nie Tian, and his voice became respectful. He was still counting on Nie Tian to save his life. Nie Tian nodded and looked at the surrounding people in black with a sympathetic expression. These people probably didn't even dream that there was actually such a madman imprisoned in the heavenly dungeon. I'm warning you, don't follow me, or else you'll lose your life. Elder Yi shouted coldly. Immediately after, his figure moved, and he left with Nie Tian. The dozens of men in black looked at the direction where the two of them left, and didn't dare to move for a long time. Quickly go and inform His Majesty. After a long time, a man in black finally reacted and shouted in panic. Nie Tian and Elder Yi flew more than 10 kilometers away from the heavenly dungeon and finally stopped. Elder Yi, you go and look for the things, I won't go with you. I still have a friend here, if I disappear, he will be worried, Nie Tian said. He didn't intend to follow Elder Yi to look for the Millennium Ice Soul and the Fire Lotus Fruit. Who knew where Elder Yi could find him? Nie Tian still had to bring Duanmu Lu to continue his training. Moreover, the Great Chu Empire's matter wasn't over yet, and there was still the Crown Prince waiting for Nie Tian to deal with. Alright. Elder Yi nodded and immediately asked, Mr. Nie, I will be gone for at most 5 days, at least 3 days. When he returns, where can I find you? 3 to 5 days? So soon? Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned. The Millennium Ice Soul and the Fire Lotus Fruit were both rank 6 medicinal herbs. Even if Elder Yi was a spirit wheel expert, he wouldn't be able to find them so easily. Unless he knew where to find these 2 items and went to get them directly. Elder Yi smiled and said, "To be honest, I and Meng Fanchen are friends. If the Magic Pill Makers Guild has these 2 items, he will definitely give them to me." Nie Tian was stunned again. Of course he knew that Meng Fanchen was the president of the Magic Pill Makers Guild. However, the Millennium Ice Soul and the Fire Lotus Fruit weren't small items. If Meng Fanchen was willing to give them to Elder Yi directly, it meant that the 2 of them weren't ordinary friends. "If you come back, you can go to Chaos City to find me. With your strength, it shouldn't be difficult to find me," Nie Tian thought for a moment and said. "Chaos City?" Elder Yi was stunned for a moment. He seemed to be a little hesitant, but he still nodded and said, "All right, it's a deal. I will take my leave now." After he finished speaking, Elder Ye's figure flashed and disappeared. Who exactly is this guy? He actually has a friendship with Meng Fanchen. Nie Tian looked at the direction where Elder Yi disappeared and muttered to himself. At this moment, Elder Ye's voice suddenly sounded in Nie Tian's mind. It was actually the latter who transmitted his voice. "Mr. Nie, my name is Yi Linyun." Yi Linyun. Nie Tian was slightly stunned and muttered, "I seem to have heard this name before." Damn. Nie Tian thought hard and suddenly remembered. He shouted, "Frenzied Blade." Chapter 402. Nie Tian looked at the direction in which Elder Yi disappeared, and finally remembered who he was. Killing Blade. Yi Linyun. The first time Nie Tian heard of this name was at the Deyuan Chamber of Commerce in Danwu City. At that time, the chief appraiser invited by the Deyuan Chamber of Commerce, Lin Yifang of the Lin family, was auctioning the second half of the Wild World Defying Blade technique. 80 years ago, he was the peerless swordsman who challenged all the geniuses of Su Mi Ling City. Nie Tian still remembered that Qiu Shan was very emotional at that time, and in the end, the second half of the Wild World Defying Blade technique was also in his hands. No wonder. Why do I feel that the aura of the blade on Elder Yi is similar to Qiu Shan's aura? They actually cultivated the same blade technique. Nie Tian muttered to himself, but his expression slowly changed strangely. It seems that Qiu Shan has a ring on his hand, and there are 2 words on it, Ling Yun. Thinking of this, Nie Tian frowned even more and felt strange. Could it be that Qiu Shan and Yi Linyun are related? Qiu Shan and Yi Linyun, not only were they related, but they were also very close. The 2 of them were directly related by blood. Unfortunately, Nie Tian did not know this. He had never asked about Qiu Shan's background, and the latter had never told him. Moreover, one of them was called Qiu Shan, and the other was called Yi Linyun, no matter how he thought about it. "I can't think of anything right now. I'll ask Elder Yi when he comes back." Nie Tian nodded, and suddenly realized that the sky was getting dark. Nie Tian thought that if he went to look for Duanmu Lu now, it would not be easy to find him, so he would wait until tomorrow. Although Duanmu Lu did not have much experience, and was a little dull, he was very shrewd. Moreover, the female general seemed to have a good impression of Duanmu Lu, and seemed to care a little. Presumably, she would not watch Duanmu Lu do anything stupid. Nie Tian walked on the streets of Chuyang City, preparing to find a hotel to stay in. At this time, the night had just fallen on the streets of Chuyang City, but it was actually more lively than during the day. As the imperial city of the Great Chu Empire, Chuyang City was undoubtedly the most prosperous city in the Great Chu Empire. This kind of super big city always maintained a lively atmosphere, be it day or night. Nie Tian's interest was piqued. Looking at the bustling scene around him, he became more and more excited as he walked. After a while, he suddenly discovered that he had arrived at a street that was even more luxurious and noisy than other places. Just as he stood on the side of the street, he actually smelled a strong scent of cosmetic. Countless people around Nie Tian were running into the street. They all had wretched smiles on their faces as if they were going to do something bad. Nye Tian took a look and immediately understood that the street in front of him was definitely a gathering place for the brothels of Chuyang City. Both sides of the street were filled with gorgeously dressed girls. Sigh. Nye Tian looked at the hurried people around him, diving into the arms of those girls. He couldn't help but sigh and shake his head, saying, "Wine is the poison, lust is the bone scraper." Saying this, Nye Tian prepared to leave. "Get out of the way." At this time, a carriage suddenly rushed out. The driver shouted, "It's the carriage of the Crown Prince's residence, get out of the way." Upon hearing the coachman's shout, the young masters all gave way to him. Nye Tian frowned slightly and dodged to the side of the road. Looking at the carriage speeding over, he said, "This Crown Prince is really arrogant. Even a driver is so domineering. A dog that threatens its master's power." Nye Tian didn't want to pay any more attention and turned to leave. "Let me go. Woo." Just as the carriage sped past him, a woman's cry suddenly came from inside the carriage. But it only made one sound, as if someone had covered her mouth and she couldn't make a sound. The carriage sped past and stopped at the largest brothel on the street. There was a big sign on the door which read, 10,000 Spring Courtyard. Huh! Nye Tian slightly frowned and said in his heart, "That cry just now, why did it sound a bit familiar?" At this time, two men jumped down from the carriage, unexpectedly carrying an unconscious girl. "It's her." Although separated by a distance, Nye Tian clearly saw that the unconscious girl was not someone else. It was the girl who was molested by Lu Jinyuan during the day Li Jiao Er. Bastard! Nye Tian was smart and immediately guessed what was going on. The carriage belonged to the Crown Prince's residence, so these people must be from the Crown Prince's residence. Lu Jinyuan died because he molested Li Jiao Er. The Crown Prince not only wanted to find Nye Tian for revenge, but also Li Jiao Er. At this time, this innocent girl must be sold to the 10,000 Spring Courtyard. This Crown Prince is worse than a beast. He didn't even let a little girl go. Nye Tian roared in his heart and immediately walked over. Since he had already intervened in this matter, he naturally couldn't watch Li Jiao Er be sold to a brothel. Nye Tian walked over and spread out his divine scent. He immediately noticed that there were many strong people lurking around. This was the brothel of Chuyang City, so there must be many watchdogs, and there was no lack of strong people among them. Nye Tian suppressed the anger in his heart and calmed himself down. He walked on the street like an ordinary person. On the street, both sides were full of hot girls wearing revealing clothes. Each of them was gorgeously dressed, waving their handkerchief. Their faces were charming and full of amorous feelings. "Oh, mister, come to me quickly. Life is short, we should enjoy ourselves while we can. My kung fu is very good, I will definitely serve you comfortably." "Yes, sir, don't be shy, I am waiting for you here." "Oh, sir, your eyes are popping out. Am I so beautiful?" "If you like me, come in." Wave after wave of women with heavy makeup used all kinds of tricks to attract customers. Those who came to this kind of place at this time were all foppish young masters, rich young masters, and unlucky people who were dissatisfied with their married life. Nye Tian's appearance among these people was a little eye-catching. He looked to be about 16 or 17 years old, with a handsome face, tall and straight posture, and firm eyes. Experienced girls could tell at a glance that this was his first time here. Seeing Nye Tian walking towards them, the girls on the street all called out to him, their eyes burning with desire. If they could spend a night with such a man, even if they had to pay for it, they would be willing. But Nye Tian didn't look sideways and turned a blind eye to these calls. He walked leisurely until he reached the 10,000 Spring Courtyard before stopping. At this time, the people in the carriage of the Crown Prince's residence had already entered, and the carriage was taken away by the servants of the 10,000 Spring Courtyard. As soon as Nye Tian came to a stop, a group of beautiful women walked towards him, all of them wearing light garments, their curvaceous bodies exuding a soul-stirring temptation. Nye Tian looked up at the women in front of him and couldn't help but blush. Although he had lived 2 lives and was already a 200-year-old monster, he only loved Luo Xian in his previous life. However, in his previous life, he only loved Luo Xian, but he died on the night of their wedding night. In this life, he was not of age yet. So Nye Tian was really not familiar with the matters between men and women. Chapter 403. Nye Tian clenched his fists and said in his heart, "Calm down." He had never been so nervous when he was alone in the forbidden areas of the heaven realm, but now he was sweating profusely. If his disciples saw him like this, it would really be shameful. Taking a deep breath, Nye Tian calmed down, looked at the girls in front of him, and said in his heart, "No wonder so many people come to this kind of place." The women in front of him were all extremely charming, even he couldn't help being tempted, not to mention those young masters. "Oh, this handsome little brother, who are you looking for? Let this servant serve you, okay? I guarantee you'll want to die from pleasure after the first time, you'll want to do it again." Just as Nye Tian calmed down a little, a woman with a mouth full of red powder greeted him, her voice so sweet it could melt a man's heart. Damn! Nye Tian was taken aback by this woman's initiative, taking a few steps back and almost falling. This woman's power was really strong. Even a true element boundary cultivator might not be able to force Nye Tian into such an embarrassing situation. Fortunately, Nye Tian's willpower was off the charts, otherwise, he really would have lost his dignity. "Go away, little slut, this handsome little brother likes the auntie type. Look at your small body, you're far from it." At that moment, another figure appeared. It turned out to be an auntie with a thick foundation that couldn't hide the wrinkles on her face. This auntie was even more amazing. Opening her 2 big arms, she couldn't wait to immediately hug Nye Tian in her arms. Nye Tian was scared out of his wits. He hastily dodged and followed the crowd into the legendary Thousand Spring courtyard. There's actually someone with such a heavy taste, really amazing. As Nye Tian walked in, he couldn't help but look back at the fat auntie. His heart couldn't help but feel a chill. Nye Tian followed behind the others and came to the hall on the first floor of the Wan Chun courtyard. Unfortunately, everyone else had an acquaintance and was directly taken away by the girls, leaving Nye Tian standing there stupidly, not knowing what to do. He didn't know where Li Jiao Air would be taken, so he looked around. After thinking for a while, Nye Tian turned around and walked to the second floor. "Hey handsome, you look unfamiliar. Do you need Yao Er's help?" Just then, a sweet voice rang out. A girl in purple clothes appeared in front of Nye Tian. Nye Tian looked at the girl in front of him. She looked to be only 11 or 12 years old. Her facial features were exquisite, and it was obvious that she was a beauty. Fortunately, the woman looked normal. At the very least, she didn't pounce on him. Nye Tian looked at her, thought for a moment, then directly took out a piece of upper-grade origin crystal and handed it to her, saying, "I want to ask you something." The girl called Yao or looked at the high-grade origin crystal in her hand, her eyes widened, and she nodded repeatedly. "Young master, please ask. As long as Yao knows, I will tell you everything." A piece of high-grade essence crystal was worth 1,000,000 gold coins. No wonder Yao was so excited. "I want to know, where can I find the girl who was just sent in?" Nye Tian asked faintly. Yao was dazed for a second, then immediately understood. She let out a long "oh" and smiled. "Yao got it. Young master, you have that kind of fetish. You are only interested in virgins, right?" Nye Tian was speechless. He smiled awkwardly, then nodded. Right now, saving people's lives was more important. Reputation and whatnot could be put aside for the time being. Humph! Unexpectedly, Yao's face changed the next moment, and she directly scolded, "Pervert!" Nye Tian was dazed for a second, and couldn't react for a moment. "Yao, are you lying again?" At this time, a young man in white clothes walked over, looking at Yao, and seemed a little angry. Nye Tian looked at the young man in white clothes in front of him, and he was surprised again. This young man in white clothes looked to be 15 or 16 years old. He had fair skin, a handsome face, and was a little too handsome. Also, this person's eyes were pure, as clear as water, and his noble temperament was incompatible with everything around him. Young master. Yaoer didn't lie. This guy is a pervert. He came to this kind of place and only likes virgins. Pervert, a big pervert. Yaoer retreated to the side of the young man in white clothes, staring at Nye Tian, and said angrily, "You." Nye Tian looked at Yaoer, and couldn't say anything for a long time. This little girl actually wasn't from the Wan Chun brothel. Nye Tian had always thought that she was a girl from the Wan Chun brothel. Nye Tian looked at the young man in front of him strangely and thought to himself, who would bring a maid to a brothel? This guy is really strange. However, when Nye Tian carefully observed the young man in front of him, he actually smelled a light body fragrance from the latter's body. A young girl's body fragrance. The next moment, Nye Tian's eyes slightly widened, and he almost shouted. This guy's body fragrance was definitely a young girl's body fragrance. Nye Tian immediately understood that this guy was a young girl dressed as a man. No wonder he brought a maid to a brothel, so it turned out that he was here to play. It was very obvious that the person in front of him was the same as Nye Tian. It was also the first time that a young girl had come to a brothel. "This young master, I am Murong Ziying." The person looked at Nye Tian, slightly cupped his hands, and said in a refined and courteous manner, "I am really sorry, Yaoer is naturally mischievous and likes to joke around. This one apologizes to you on her behalf." "It's okay." Nye Tian was also speechless. That little girl called Yaoer with a joke ruined his reputation. Yaoer still didn't let it go and puckered her lips. "He is a pervert. Why are you apologizing to him?" "Yaoer." Murong Zian glared at her, and only then did the latter stop talking. Nye Tian no longer cared about these two weirdos, and turned around to leave. "This young master." But Murong Ziying spoke again, and called out to Nye Tian, "What else do you want?" Nye Tian didn't want to waste time, and seemed a bit impatient. "That." Murong Ziying hesitated for a while, but still said, "This is my first time coming to this kind of place. Can I invite you to go with me?" "Go with you?" Nye Tian almost shouted out and said in his heart, "Boss, this is a brothel. Do you think you are going on a sightseeing tour? And you want to go with me?" "Sorry, I don't have time." Nye Tianlun coldly refused, and soon after, he directly left. "Why are you so fierce, big pervert?" Murong Ziying didn't say anything, but Yaoer pouted her lips again and said. Nye Tian didn't care about her, and directly walked to the second floor. Murong Ziying looked at Nye Tian's back, thought for a while, and said, "Yaoer, let's follow him." "Young miss, why do we follow him?" Yaoer had a helpless expression. Murong Ziying hurriedly covered Yaoer's mouth and said angrily, "To see my young master." Yaoer pried Murong Ziying's hand away and rolled her eyes and said snappily, "Young master. Is that enough?" Murong Ziying nodded and said, "Let's go and see what that guy wants to do." Chapter 404. Nye Tian walked up to the second floor, and was completely speechless when he realized that the strange master and servant pair were actually following him. Nye Tian didn't pay any attention to them, and continued to search around. Unfortunately, there were too many rooms in the Wan Chun courtyard. If Nye Tian were to look through them one by one, he didn't know how long it would take. "Young master, you're sweating profusely. You must be too anxious and can't suppress the evil fire in your body." At this time, a middle-aged woman's voice sounded behind Nye Tian. Nye Tian turned around and saw a red-clothed woman with a mole on her lips. Although she had heavy makeup, it couldn't hide her old age. She was smiling at him. "Io, what a handsome young master. First time to our Wan Chun courtyard? Let mommy help you." The woman covered her mouth and could tell that it was Nye Tian's first time here. Nie Tian saw the long black beard on the woman's lips and felt a chill in his heart. His face turned pale and he thought, this place is even scarier than the land of bloody massacre. Young master, what are you thinking about? The red-clothed woman saw through Nie Tian's thoughts and giggled. Mommy is already 50 years old and can't stand your torment. Mommy's meaning is to help you find a good girl who will serve you well. This red-clothed woman obviously thought that Nie Tian was a rich young master who came to the Wan Chun courtyard for the first time. This kind of person was the favorite of old mothers like them because they were easy to kill. I want to find the girl who was just sent in. She must be a virgin. Nie Tian directly took out 10 high-grade origin crystals and said with all his courage. In order to save Li Jiao, Nie Tian's moral integrity was shattered. The red-clothed woman saw the origin crystals in Nie Tian's hand and her eyes turned red. Even in the Wan Chun courtyard where money flowed like water, there weren't many young masters who were willing to take out 10 high-grade origin crystals as a tip. What? You can't find her? Nie Tian saw that the red-clothed woman didn't respond and reminded her. Yes. The red-clothed woman reacted, and almost immediately snatched the crystal from Nie Tian's hand. She said excitedly, Mother, I know what young master wants. Please follow me. Nie Tian frowned slightly and followed behind the woman in red. A moment later, the red-clothed woman brought Nie Tian to the highest floor of the Myriad Spring Courtyard, the 5th floor. As soon as Nie Tian reached the 5th floor, he saw a large hall with a huge signboard hanging on the door, Butterfly Transformation Pavilion. What is this place? Nie Tian furrowed his brows because he realized that the 2 black-robed men guarding the entrance were at the 9th level of the Giant Soul Realm. The 2 guards were at the 9th level Giant Spirit Realm. This undoubtedly meant that the Butterfly Transformation Veranda was an extremely important place. Young master, this is the virgin you wanted. The red-clothed woman giggled and pointed at the Butterfly Transformation Veranda. Nie Tian was even more puzzled, but he didn't think too much about it. Stop right there. What are you doing? The red-clothed woman led Nie Tian over but was stopped by the 2 guards. The red-clothed woman giggled and moved forward to whisper into the ears of one of the guards. Her voice was so low that even Nie Tian couldn't hear what she said. The guard tilted his head and looked at Nie Tian as if trying to confirm something. Nie Tian didn't say anything and directly took out 10 high-grade crystal and placed it in front of the guard. Young master, you're really reasonable. The guard chuckled and took the crystal. He bowed slightly and said, Young master, please. Nie Tian stepped inside. It was at this time that 2 figures rushed over in a hurry. Holy shit! They actually followed me here. Are they done yet? Nie Tian didn't need to turn around to know that the 2 behind him were definitely the strange master and servant pair of Murong Xing and Yao. We want to go in as well. Yao shouted. The 2 guards glared at her and didn't pamper her. They roared, Where did this little bastard come from? Graham. How dare you? Don't you know who our family's young master is? Yao wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she had a domineering look. Nie Tian shook his head speechlessly and said to the guard, They're with me. Let them in. The guard was obviously not too willing. Nie Tian could only take out dozens of high-grade crystal again. Thank you, young master. Murong Xing smiled politely and followed Nie Tian in. Nie Tian didn't say anything. He thought in his heart, What sin did I commit to provoke these 2 masters? Entering the hall, the scene that greeted him made Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned. In front of him was a spacious hall full of people. At the top was a very large high platform. On the high platform there was actually an auction. Auction? It was indeed an auction. What can be auctioned in this place? Nie Tian frowned slightly, his eyes flashing with doubt. It was the first time he came to such a place, and he didn't even know much about the affairs between men and women. Naturally, he couldn't guess what was being auctioned here. Myriad Spring Courtyard, Butterfly Pavilion. This was a relatively special place. Many people knew that this place was not an ordinary place to seek pleasure, but a place for people of status to find special hobbies. At this moment, the audience seats were all people of status in Chuyang City. Their eyes were all looking at the high platform in the hall, for fear of missing some wonderful scene. Nie Tian found a corner near the front row and sat down directly, wanting to see what would happen next. At this time, on the high platform, a 25-year-old woman walked out slowly. She had an enchanting figure and was dressed in revealing clothes. Her eyes were watery and full of charm. She glanced at the audience below the stage, covered her mouth and smiled. Then she opened her red lips and said in a sweet voice that made people's bones tingle, "My lords, thank you for taking care of the Butterfly Pavilion's business." As she said this, 12th Maiden twisted her waist and bowed to the audience. The woman on the stage was called 12th Maiden. Most people knew her. She was the owner of Myriad Spring Courtyard, Luo Jiangjiang's mistress. And Luo Jiangjiang was also a big shot in Chuyang City, the sworn brother of the Crown Prince. As soon as 12th Maiden's voice fell, the guests below the stage all chatted and laughed. 12th Maiden has really become more and more beautiful these years, and she is also getting better at talking. Luo Jiangjiang is really a god. He taught her well. That's right. Lord Luo Jiangjiang is definitely a character. I admire him. I don't know where he got so many chicks. Who cares so much? I'm here to have fun. Let's see what's good today. If I like it, I'll buy it home and enjoy it to my heart's content. If you dare to buy it home, your tigress will skin you alive. Seeing that the atmosphere below the stage had been stirred up, 12th Maiden smiled sweetly and said, "Dear masters, prepare your money bags. The auction is about to begin. My newly trained girls will be on the stage soon. I guarantee that their skills are extraordinary, and they are all unmarried. The old rule is that the highest bidder wins. If any master likes them and is willing to spend a lot of money, they can buy them home to play with." At this moment, Nie Tian finally understood what was going on. Chapter 405. Nie Tian was right. The Butterfly Transformation Pavilion was the place where a woman's first night was auctioned. Butterfly transformation, cocoon transformation into a butterfly, it was a metaphor for the process of a girl becoming a woman. Clap, clap, clap. On the high platform, Aunt 12 clapped her hands. Aunt 12 clapped her hands, and a small, graceful figure timidly walked out from the layers of gauze. This was a little girl who looked to be only 13 or 14 years old. She wore a purple dress with a pink ribbon tied around her waist, which made her chest bulge. Her makeup was much lighter than that of the girls on the street. Her face was young and tender, her facial features delicate, and her skin was sparkling and translucent. There was a faint blush on her little face, and her charming appearance was very lovable. Nie Tian looked at the girl on the stage. There was no desire in his eyes, only endless anger. In his previous life, he had never thought that in this world, besides the rule of the strong, the filth was far beyond his expectations. In his previous life, he was used to seeing bloody battlefield. But the scene in front of him made him feel even more terrified than the mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Imagine, if the girl on the stage was your family member, how would you react? If she was Emo Rushi or Nyeyuro, Nie Tian would definitely turn the Butterfly Transformation Pavilion upside down and smash it to pieces. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Yeya, only 13 years old this year." At this time, Aunt 12 spoke in a very sweet voice. "Don't be fooled by Miss Yeya's young age, her figure is very good. Miss Yeya just came to our Wan Chun courtyard yesterday, and is still clean. Which gentleman has taken a fancy to her? Please bid now. Every moment of the night is worth 1,000 pieces of gold." Aunt 12 said with a smile. The girl named Yeya next to her seemed very uneasy. She looked uneasily at the audience, but all she saw were greedy and wretched faces. At a certain moment, she inadvertently glanced at Nie Tian and saw that the latter's eyes and expression were different from everyone else's. She could not help but pause for a moment, but was disappointed the next moment. If Nye Tian was a gentleman, would he still come to such a place? But this scene was perfectly captured by Nye Tian, which made his heart tremble and slightly move. Her clear and despairing eyes were a stark contrast to the chaos around her. This made Nye Tian even angrier. If it weren't for the fact that there were experts hiding here, Nye Tian would have definitely taken them away by force. The two guard dogs at the entrance of the butterfly transformation veranda were both at the 9th level of the giant spirit realm. Who knew how many more experts were hidden in the shadows? If he wanted to save them, he had to be patient. Nye Tian knew that there were too many injustices in this world. Even if he stood at the peak of the heaven realm, he wouldn't be able to take care of all the injustices in this world, let alone the fact that he was only at the giant spirit realm. However, as long as he encountered injustice, he would definitely intervene. Beside Nye Tian, Morong Xing's expression was also very ugly. His body seemed to be trembling slightly. Obviously, he was suppressing the anger in his heart. Yu Yu's appearance caused a commotion below the stage. 100 low-grade essence crystals. I want this little beauty. At this time, someone couldn't hold back anymore and raised his hand impatiently, shouting loudly. This person was a 30 to 40 years old brawny man. He was extremely muscular and his arms were thicker than an ordinary martial artist's thighs. However, he wasn't fat. His muscles were clearly defined and looked very powerful. Nye Tian glanced at this person and was quite surprised. This guy was actually a true element level 1 martial artist. To actually meet such an expert in this kind of place, it was really a little unexpected. Looking at this guy's build, he was definitely a strength-type martial artist. Nye Tian estimated that this guy's strength was not below his own. 100 low-grade essence crystals. How can you have the nerve to ask for it? This price can only buy a night of trash. Wanting to buy Miss Yu Yu's first night is just wishful thinking. This young master will offer 200 low-grade essence crystals. On the other side, a youth in luxurious clothes spoke up. A pair of shifty eyes stared at Yu Yu as if his eyeballs were about to pop out. 100 low-grade essence crystals, 200 low-grade essence crystals. This kind of figure was just a cold number to some people. But to Yu Yu, it represented the most precious thing. This kind of price was too low to Nye Tian. But Yu Yu was just an ordinary girl. To be able to have this kind of price was already considered not bad. That brawny man who called himself Gooden glanced at the girl on the stage, seeming to be evaluating whether it was worth it for him to increase the price. At some point, Yu Yu's eyes revealed despair. And Gooden seemed to have noticed this. He suddenly stood up and roared, "Your father offers 1,000 low-grade essence crystals." And, the moment Gooden stood up, Nye Tian immediately sensed that several tyrannical auras appeared and directly locked onto him. In the next moment, if Gooden made any strange movements, these auras would attack without mercy. Fortunately, Godan sat down again. This fellow seemed to have sensed something. Nye Tian glanced at Gooden at this time and vaguely guessed that this was probably this guy's first time coming to a place like Myriad Spring Courtyard. Gooden's bid exceeded many people's expectations, so no one else bid again. At this time, Ant 12 smiled and was about to congratulate Gooden, but a figure stood up. It was Nye Tian. As Nye Tian stood up, the hidden strong aura appeared again. But Nye Tian didn't care. There was a faint smile on his lips as he looked at Ant 12 on the high stage. "Mister, is there a flower on my face? It's worth looking at." Ant 12 was obviously a veteran. She wasn't nervous and even flirted with Nye Tian. Nye Tian looked calm and said, "I want to buy the girl next to you. Name your price." Ant 12 was slightly stunned, then immediately smiled and said, "Miss Yu Yu is a good girl. She is only 13 years old this year. If she stays in our Myriad Spring Courtyard, she will be a big money tree. This young master, 10,000 high-grade essence crystals." Before Ant 12 could finish, Nye Tian directly interrupted her and said cold, Is that enough? Aunt 12 was stunned and her whole body froze. Everyone else present was also shocked by Nie Tian's generosity and began to discuss in low voices. My dear father, 10,000 high-grade essence crystals. That's 1 million low-grade essence crystals. That can buy 10,000 girls. Yeah, who is this kid? How can he be so generous when he opens his mouth? He's really going to shock people to death. I've never seen this face before. He's probably the young master of some big family. This is a real King tycoon. Yu was also stunned. She stared at Nie Tian, her little face petrified. She never thought that a stranger would offer such a high price to buy her. Deal? Nie Tian didn't care about the others' reactions and asked cold. Before he left Heaven Luo City, Jean de Bao gave him a common gold card of the Martial Arts Merchant Union. There were 1 million high-grade essence crystals in it, all the profits from the Dragon Blood Martial Union. Chapter 406. It had to be said that Jean de Bao was quite meticulous. Otherwise, Nie Tian really wouldn't know how to save her. There were hidden experts all around. If he tried to force it, it would definitely not end well. Deal. Of course, deal. Aunt 12 finally reacted. She couldn't hide her excitement and giggled. Even her chest trembled. At this time, there was no need to ask others. After all, there were not many fools who were willing to pay 10,000 upper-grade origin crystals for an ordinary girl. At this time, Aunt 12 seemed to think of something and said, Can you pay now? Aunt 12 looked at Nie Tian's ordinary clothes and was a little afraid that the latter was bluffing. She was also worried that Nie Tian didn't have that much money. Nie Tian took out the Martial Business Alliance's gold card and said, Don't worry. You'll know after using your divine sense. Aunt 12 was also a martial artist and had the strength of the manifestation realm. Naturally, she could see that this was the Martial Business Alliance's universal gold card. She also heard that this kind of universal gold card was very difficult to get. The amount of money needed to be at least 10,000 upper-grade origin crystals. It was indeed not easy for Jean de Bao to get this card. He even asked Aokiki Lily and Ding Yifun for help. Otherwise, with his status, it would really be difficult. Aunt 12's divine sense probed into the gold card and felt the amount of money inside. Her mouth immediately opened wide and didn't close for a long time. Let's continue the auction. Nie Tian didn't care about her. He put away the gold card and planned to pay later. Good, good, good. Aunt 12 said good 3 times and couldn't stop smiling. She said, You can pay whenever you want. As long as you are happy, the auction will continue. When the audience saw Aunt 12's reaction, they all widened their eyes and their jaws dropped to the ground. Everyone was very curious about how much money was in Nie Tian's Martial Business Alliance Universal Gold Card to make Aunt 12 so excited. After a while, the auction continued. But the rest of the time was all Nie Tian's show. He went all out and bought all the girls on the stage. The price remained the same, 10,000 upper-grade origin crystals. At that moment, everyone looked at Nie Tian with a different expression. Where did this rich young master come from? How could he be so heroic and dazzling? Nie Tian bought more than a dozen 13 or 14-year-old girls in one breath, but his face became more and more gloomy because Li Jiao Air still hadn't appeared. On the high platform, Aunt 12 giggled. She was really happy today. She had met a sucker, and a super generous sucker. If she met a few more of these fellows, Aunt 12 would definitely wake up laughing even in her dreams. After a while, when Nie Tian was surrounded by more than 30 girls, his face gradually became gloomy. Li Jiao Air still hadn't appeared, which gave Nie Tian a bad feeling. The way Murong Xing and Yao looked at Nie Tian was extremely strange. Especially Yao, she must have thought of Nie Tian as a super pervert, buying so many girls at once. Aunt 12 sold the last girl of the day. She looked at Nie Tian and said softly, Mister, today's auction is over. Please pay the money with me. Over? Nie Tian frowned and said, It can't be over. I haven't bought enough yet. This. Aunt Twelve's face was embarrassed and said, Mister, but there are only so many girls today. The others are not virgins. Do you want them too? Aunt Twelve also regarded Nye Tian as a lecherous person. I only want virgins, Nye Tianling said coldly, completely with the attitude of a rich young master. He shouted, For the next girls, I am willing to pay 100,000 upper-grade origin crystals for each one. 100,000 upper-grade origin crystals. As soon as Nye Tian's voice fell, the whole audience was dead silent. After a long time, heated discussions sounded. Is this Mr. Crazy? How King rich is he? An ordinary girl can pay 100,000 upper-grade origin crystals. That can buy a basket of girls. Yes, this guy is definitely a scammer. No matter how rich he is, he can't spend money like this. What a super prodigal! This is the rhythm of losing millions of dollars in one night. Hearing Nye Tian's bid, Aunt Twelve was also completely stunned. Nye Tian's outrageous bid, of course, had a purpose. He wanted to force Li Jiao out. Nye Tian guessed that Li Jiao might have been detained by someone. He hoped that she was fine. Okay. Aunt Twelve thought for a moment, nodded and said, Mister, please wait a moment. I will be back soon. Aunt Twelve didn't want to miss such a good opportunity to make money. She heard that the Crown Prince's residence had sent a girl, and it seemed that she hadn't started yet. Maybe there was still time. Aunt Twelve turned and left. Anyway, there were many strong people lurking in the dark, so she wasn't afraid that Nye Tian would leave without saying goodbye. I hope nothing happened, Nye Tian said in his heart with a worried look on his face. Pervert. Big pervert. Super big pervert. At this time, Yao looked at Nye Tian and said angrily. Nye Tian didn't care about her. Now was not the time to care about his reputation. Murong Xiang looked at Nye Tian and didn't react. She could see the righteousness in Nye Tian's eyes. He definitely didn't buy these girls for pleasure. And she always felt that Nye Tian seemed to have an ulterior motive. On the other side, Aunt Twelve turned backstage and walked into a secret room with light step. Aunt Twelve pushed open the small door of the room, and panicked screams came from inside. She frowned and quickly walked in sideways. In the room, a fat man in his 30s, naked, opened his wide arms and pounced over like an eagle catching a chick. No, I beg you, please spare me. In front of him, a girl dodged left and right. She was so scared that her face turned pale, and her face was wet with tears. She screamed in panic. If Nye Tian could see this scene, he would definitely feel his blood boiling with excitement. This girl was none other than Li Jiao, and this fat man was the owner of Wan Chun Courtyard, Luo Jiangjiang. He was also the sworn brother of the Chu Crown Prince, Wang Haorui. Dead man, people are making money for you outside, but you're here enjoying yourself. You have no conscience. Aunt Twelve saw the scene in the room and seemed to be used to it. She scolded in a sweet voice. She knew that Luo Jiangjiang was a psychopath who liked to play the game of eagle and chicken with chick. The more frightened these chicks were, the more excited he, the eagle, was. He liked the feeling of being an eagle. Aunt Twelve, don't worry. I'm just playing. Luo Jiangjiang laughed, revealing 2 rows of dark yellow teeth. Then he pounced on Li Jiao again.